Bienvenue à Looking for the Ocean, où nous regardons tout ce que Pixar a jamais fait. C'est-à-dire des longs métrages, des courts métrages, des démos techniques, etc. Je suis Mark Young et comme toujours, je suis rejoint par Danny Vincent. Et avec nous aujourd'hui, c'est Jay Salahi. Wonderful.
It's normally not in French, in case you don't get the bit, Jay.
It's themed.
That's impressive. I mean, you guys could have insulted me and I wouldn't know, but it sounded nice.
I
like how we can never find what
translate.
We can never find out what tech demos means in another language. It's just that phrase does not exist.
I like having that though, because then you know it's the intro. So, hey Jay, it's so good to have you here. I'm very excited that you're on. I know you knew Danny from Why Is, and before then, I wonder if you could give us a brief introduction of yourself, what you're about, what you've been up to.
Well, first off, thanks for having me on. My name is Jay Salahi, as you just said, in French, but I know Danny for a few years now. We've been online friends for probably like 6-7 years, maybe longer.
Probably longer. I joined that site around when Skyfall came out. So probably reaching about 10 years.
Then, but I've seen you in person too. You've come here and we've hung out before.
Yes.
And we've also done a podcast or two before. But I am an independent filmmaker living in North Hollywood. I directed a $12,000 feature film, Northwood Pie. It's a little coming-of-age stoner rom-com in a pizza place that I grew up across the street from. It's streaming on Amazon and Tubi and all that stuff. And it got 93% Rotten Tomatoes and worked out. And I don't know, it was kind of one of those things that you dream of doing when you're in high school and like in college, and you just kind of say you got to go for it, and I went for it, and it worked out. So I just encourage everyone to go do that. And then to pay the bills, because I'm not quite, living large as a film director or anything yet.
Yeah.
I work as an assistant at a commercial production company, and we do a lot of ads for
that's perfect.
like E, and we do ads for CBS, All Access, or with the Paramount Plus now, and we do all the ads for NBC and stuff. So it's fun, and I get to be around cameras and work in that industry a bit. And right now I'm just trying to prepare the next movie.
I want to ask you so many questions, but I don't want to make it all about like interrogating you about your life. But do you see yourself in the future making more things like Northwood Pie, or doing more commercial work, or like what's your imagined track?
I'm only interested really in making movies. I'm not really interested in commercials and other stuff. That stuff will come. Obviously, if you direct movies or Hollywood films, you need to pay the bills in between, and I'm interested in doing that stuff, but it's not the kind of path I took. A lot of people, everyone I know kind of does commercials and music videos, and they kind of wait for someone to say, hey, you've done a great music video, and you've done a great little spec commercial, and you've done a couple short films, now do a feature film. And I didn't go to film school, and I didn't go to college. I went to a junior college for a little bit, and then I dropped out and just moved here. And I just wrote a movie and made a movie. And that was kind of the goal. I just wanted to skip ahead. I thought everyone's waiting for permission when you can just go out and do it, and you'll learn so much more. Because making a movie, it's completely different, right? It's entertaining someone for 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 30 seconds is completely different than entertaining someone for 70, 80, 90 minutes or 2 hours. So I kind of just swung for that fence, and it worked out. The movie came out good, and I've done another short film since then. I'm finishing up another short film and then trying to prep the next movie. And the goal for now is I just turned 30. So at least until I'm 40, my goal is to try to make at least 3 more feature films, probably all going to be genre, so they're more marketable and selling. And then hopefully by 40, with 3 more films, if they're all as good as Northwood Pie, eventually someone's going to call and just say, hey, do you want to make Annabelle 29? And then I'm going to say yes. And then hopefully I don't screw it up. And then, then 20 years later, I got a lazy river in my backyard, hopefully. That's pretty much my plan, my dream.
Here's the thing about Annabelle 29 is that at that point, you can't really it's going to make money, right? So you can't really screw it up that bad. Annabelle's going to always make some money.
As long as it's better than as long as it's mid Annabelle, it's okay, right? I just can't make one of the worst Annabelles.
Exactly.
It can be the 10th best Annabelle, but as long as it's not bottom, I'm okay.
I remember I went to a repertory screening of the first one during the pandemic. So I was like, oh, I have A-list still, and it's still going, and it's playing, so I've never seen this one, so might as well.
Was this like when Birds of Prey was coming out, or was this like...
No, this was... Birds of Prey came out pre-pandemic, like a month before the pandemic. This was like
Halloween...
Halloween...
Well, it came out and then the pandemic started, so I'm wondering if it was like the last thing you saw before the pandemic, or if you went out in the middle of it.
The last thing I saw before the pandemic, I have 2 answers, because I saw Roma at the Music Box, which is my actual last answer, but that's not like a new movie. That was like, they were showing an old print they had of Roma. I remember going into it being like, oh, COVID's probably not going to happen. Coming out like, Tom Hanks has COVID and the NBA is canceled? What? It all went down while I was watching Roma. But I don't really count it as my last movie before COVID because it was, a movie that was just screening. My last new movie before COVID was the forgotten... Well, it was kind of dumped by Fox Searchlight anyway at the time. But Wendy, the Peter Pan live action movie that released in February 2020, that's from the director of Beasts of the Southern Wild. It has like a 38% Rotten Tomatoes, but I gave it a 4.5 on Letterboxd, which I know to you doesn't really mean much because Jay and I get in a lot of disagreements about my rating system, but I really enjoyed Wendy.
Speaking of films before the pandemic, keeping in theme though, the last movie I saw before the pandemic hit in theaters was, of course, Onward, the forgotten Pixar movie.
I think.
Are you an Onward fan?
I am kind of an Onward fan. I mean, it's a fine, normal, I don't use that term, but average, solid Pixar family film. I mean, probably for them, it's a lower tier film, but compared to like average animated films that come out for children, it's still in the upper echelon of what I would want to watch and plan on watching. But the ending for me, and not going into too much and derailing the thing, but like the ending actually relates very similar to my family and how like some people who've passed and the way my family met up. Like my sister's never met her father, and there's some things like that. So that the ending like really is like similar to my life in a way, and it really kind of hit me in a way
Mark,
that I was
have
like,
you seen
wow.
Onward?
No, I haven't, but that
spoiler,
matches what
sorry,
I've heard
I
other
thought
people
the
say
Pixar
about
podcast
it.
guys would know,
I actually like spoilers. I'm a strange
Our
person
dynamic
in that
is
way.
that I am the Pixar geek and I'm the person dragging Mark along.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm kidding. But
That's sort of our dynamic. Sometimes I like it. Sometimes I'm like... Sometimes you're in a grouchy mood. Sometimes I am. I don't know.
I'm usually
Jay,
in the grouchy mood when we cover non-Pixar movies.
I feel like I'd rather talk about a live action film. It's weird watching Pixar film, like jumping into this, like they're almost too perfect. It's hard to grade because there's so many things. Because they say the editing is the last pass of a film, right? A last script edit in a way. But because these movies have so much money, not every animated film can do this, but they have so much money behind them and so much, talent and people that they rewrite constantly, and they can constantly. It's like when you're rewriting a script, you can always go through, like when I'm writing my script right now, and you add another layer to it. You just add another detail, every pass. Yeah. They're able to do that, or at the last second say, "Oh my God!" Basically, 1,000 times a director, when he watches the stuff, 1,000 of his things were, "Oh, I wish we were 2 inches to the left," or "Oh, I wish I just did this." They're able to fix a lot of those if they have the time and money. So the movies come out, especially the Pixar films, pretty perfect, like in a way, from a technical standpoint. That it's like. I agree with all the cuts. It's not choppy editing. The production design is always perfect. There's always thought to it. The music. I mean, everything is made and the craft is so well. It's almost hard to compare and contrast to live action and other things because it's just so perfect in a way. And that's just a praise kind of for Pixar in general. But some of the high quality animated films, it's something that can actually make you worse because you can attack your movie and overdo it. But they found a way to kind of, I think, just chisel away and streamline everything properly.
And well, I do think, especially with something like Ratatouille, you see, especially because it was like taken over by Brad Bird after Jan Pinkava started it, you can kind of see some of the seams, I think. We might talk about this later with the script, but it's interesting.
I agree, actually. I think Ratatouille, you see a little more seams than others.
It's like, yeah, but we'll talk about that later.
We're going to skip life updates because I think we've got you. We got you, right? Unless... You want to give us a life update, but I think you did already.
Life update for the viewers. My hand is broken. How about that? My right hand. There you go.
Yeah. I literally was like, we'll leave. I literally texted Mark. I was like, because we were trying to make this a little shorter. So we know you have like a hard out at one point. And I was like, Mark, let's cut the life updates, but we can let Jay talk about his hand if he wants to. He can just break it.
If you have a lot of like psychological damage related to the hand and you need to get it out.
I will just say one little venting is that I'm on a softball team. I dove for a ball, and everyone keeps saying, lie, tell a cool story you cut. I didn't catch it, though. I'm not going to lie. I dropped the ball, and I broke my hand. I'd never broken a bone. I turned 30. 2 days later, break my right hand, doing something that I do all the time. I play 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays in a men's league. I'm always running. I'm diving. I'm sliding. And then now my hand is broken, and for 5 weeks, I've really been tied down. Just watching a lot of movies, though. I've been watching more movies than usual, and I already watch a lot of movies, so it was an excuse to be more lazy.
Nice. Jay. How did you first encounter Pixar?
How did I first encounter Pixar? Well, I was born in 1993, so I'm a child of Pixar. I feel like Pixar is my childhood. When you ask me, the animated films or the touchstones, there's the classic Disney. There's like that 4 mega run they had in the late 80s, early 90s. And then there's the Pixar movies. And that's kind of my like animated childhood. And I can't remember. I think the first one I saw in theaters was Bug's Life. I remember seeing a Bug's Life. Toy Story I'd already seen on VHS. That was what I see. They're bringing back memories here. They used to have the VHS for Bug's Life. I remember after it came out, they would always have at Hollywood Video across the street from my house, and there was a Blockbuster. We'd go to Blockbuster more, but Hollywood Video was closer, less selection, but I'd still go there. They would always have every case was a different bug on it. You know, they used to do that all the time at stores where like they would put different characters on all the cases. So as a kid, you know, and you didn't own the movie, like I'd go rent the same movies a lot of times, but I'd always have to like change the cover or always get the same exact cover or do certain things with it. And I don't know, it just reminds me of that. So my memory of Pixar is walking through a video store and grabbing, I'm forgetting the names. What's the caterpillar's name? That was my favorite character. Heimlich. I mean, come on. Heimlich's Choo Choo Train. How could I forget that? Great. The best ride at California Adventure that they tore out.
R.I.P.
So R.I.P. But then Toy Story, of course, everything. I remember seeing all of it. I remember seeing Toy Story 2 in theaters. I remember seeing Monsters, Inc. when I lived in Long Beach for a year. We went to the big theater there and saw Monsters, Inc. with my neighbors. Finding Nemo. I mean, so many things. Like, I mean, I love Pixar. My 10 favorite animated films, probably 5 or 6 are Pixar, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I'm also not like an animated person. I'm not like Danny over here, like who's not nothing against it, but like it's just not my.
Even if I am an animated person, I'm willing to. I don't have it open right now, but I'm willing to bet if I look at my top 10 animated, I'm willing to bet 4 are at least Pixar, which is a lot for someone who's into animation. You know, like to keep 4 of in like the same creative team.
Yeah, because I only know the mainstream kind of animation. That's really all I've kind of seen, to be honest.
Sorry, I just remember we don't need to get into it too much, but I remember your Puss in Boots review getting people mad, and I was like, yeah, get people mad, please.
No, side note about Puss in Boots, I can't. I mean,
Puss in Boots reboot?
There is that Goldilocks. It's fine. It's a good kiss. But people acting like it's something great. There's this guy's like the big Hansel and whatever that guy, the villain guy. What's his name? I don't know. Oh, Jack.
Yeah. Oh, I hate him. Jack Horner.
It's weird to see everyone giving these things. I'm like,
role.
that's just a regular Shrek villain. This is the villain I've seen in every DreamWorks movie I've ever seen. It's like, as someone who grew up watching these movies, it's weird to be now 30 and be like, yeah, it's a DreamWorks movie. I mean, I get people. That for me is a little. And then for me, the Goldilocks character, last thing, annoyed me because there's a point in a movie where I think all she says is the same thing. There's 3 or 4 different times where she makes the same joke. A little this, not too much of that. Oh, that's just right. It's like you can do it once, you can do it twice, 4 times. Every time she speaks, it's a pun about hot and cold. I get it. But it's fine. It's for children. It's not for a 30-year-old man. But when I go online, I see 37-year-old man like, this is the best movie ever made. I'm like, I don't know.
I think I made.
I'm gonna get some enemies here. That's gonna get my IMDb score down
on this podcast. But what drives me crazy is like the people who are like, this shows how panic attacks are done so realistically. So many people are going to see this who haven't seen it before. I'm like, dude, the most popular television show, not television show, that's too much. The most popular comedy on TV right now, besides Abbott Elementary, is Ted Lasso, and the entire second season is built around him having panic attacks. You cannot tell me that adults, who are presumably the people tweeting this, have not seen a panic attack depicted in media before.
Yeah.
Come on. Come on.
But I want to make clear, I had no problems with it. I had nothing negative really to say about that. That's just from an adult perspective. It's like, I don't mind any of those things, but my attraction to Pixar movies is there's the little extra sense of, sort of say realism, but there's, I guess when I watch other animated, there's that sense where things go into cartoon logic and cartoon mode, and this Ratatouille falls into that at some points, but there's a part of like where that's where maybe some of the blockbusters feel today, where they stop, I don't know, there's a point where it becomes unrelatable in a sense, which is fine for an enjoyment, but it doesn't have that deeper level for me to, I guess as I grow older, to keep that level where, wow, this is just as good as when I was 10, when I'm 30 somehow.
All right, and then what would you say the first thing you think of when you hear like Pixar? You think of Pixar. You know, get what I'm getting at? Like, what is like the characteristics?
I mean, I think of the Incredicoaster at California Adventure when you say Pixar personally, because I just was at Disneyland, fun ride. That
was California Screamin' back when I was the one time I visited Disneyland.
Yeah, well, low-key California Screamin' was kind of better. The music was custom to it. So, but it is nice some of the upgrades they made to the ride, but I like the old music better.
Have I ever told you my story about that ride? Going on it as a kid? My dad told me it was a normal wooden coaster, and it effectively scared me off riding a launch coaster for like 7 or 8 years, because I was just so freaked. Because I was like 6, 7 when we went, so I was just thinking, I was not expecting to be like shot up, even though I'm sure it's like pretty mild, but like for a first time So I'm on that expecting just to be like, oh yeah, it just goes up and down. Nope, it was too intense for little baby Danny.
Well, my sister went on it at 4. I stuffed napkins under her shoes and she loved it. So, but
Nice.
no, but I'm
Well,
joking. Me personally, I chickened out the first time we went. When I was a kid, I went at 8 years old. I cried and I just ran through the thing. I said, no, thank you. I'm not riding it. So no blame to you whatsoever. I wasn't until I was older I started loving rides. But no, Pixar, I guess if we're going all these distractions, I do think of like Toy Story and Bug's Life and Monster. I think of all that stuff. It's just like now that I'm older, it kind of homogenizes into like one big memory than a specific thing. But Toy Story, I think, is my favorite animated movie. So I do think about Toy Story, I guess, the most.
Well, let me then adjust this. Even though you answered everything the way, like, good answers. But what do you think of when you think of Pixar, like, today? Like, say, like, Pixar's like, oh, we got something new. Like, I'm not saying like the stuff they've announced. This is like a hypothetical, like, oh, there's a new Pixar movie out. What do you think when you hear that? You remember that, like, there's a new Pixar out or something?
I mean, I'm going to see it. I mean, there's no Pixar movie I'm not going to see. I feel like I'm excited for every Pixar movie. It doesn't mean the same I thought before. I thought that initial run for me, that first Toy Story to Toy Story 3 was like, 10 films, like the most perfect run ever. And then since then, I mean, still love Pixar, but it's not the same regard in my heart. But I'm also not a developing person in the same way, and I'm an adult. So it's hard to necessarily, you can try to think you're objective about things, but you are a product of your time. And it's no coincidence that when people grow up, no matter when they're born, even if they have reasons for things, a lot of their favorite things end up to be from a certain time period, even as you weed things out that aren't of quality, the things that of quality that you still do love are still from that segment of time period, usually that you watched at a core developmental age. So it's tough to be as honest, I think, about something like that. And I haven't seen them as much. And I'm someone that really depends on how many times. If you see a movie 10 times and still love it, that's that's kind of how it is.
I wanted to ask, do you know off the top of your head, like, what this rewatch of Ratatouille was for you? Because I remember Jay, when he was on Why Is, I think it was your 9th time watching X-Men Apocalypse, and we were all just in awe of that. We were all just... so do you know, like, what, like, since you've been keeping track of, like, your watches,
well, since I got a letterbox in 2013, I've seen it 4 times. So... but I saw it in theaters with my mom and my little sister. My little sister was 5. We saw Ratatouille in theaters that summer. So I saw it then, and then I probably saw it another 2 or 3 times before I got a letterbox. So I had to guess this was my 7th viewing, or maybe 8th.
Okay, so
no
less than
DVD watches?
Oh, I mean, those are counting. It's all watches. That's movie theaters, DVDs, all that streaming. It's just that's how many times I've sat down and paid full attention to the movie.
You're telling me, Jay, that X-Men Apocalypse is more rewatchable than Rat? No, I'm kidding.
Well, it's not how it works. Also, it's sometimes a franchise.
You will rewatch like the entire series. Yeah.
And sometimes these new movies come out. You get into it. You watch it. You get the Blu-ray, and then I watch it right when I get the Blu-ray. And then 2 days later, I want to watch it again and compare. I'll listen to the commentary, and then I'll watch it again the next day. So I kind of like some of these new movies, like Apocalypse, I'll watch 4 or 5 times in a year, and then they'll get on their cycle of every 1 or 2 years whenever I rewatch the series.
No, I get what you're saying. It's like I saw Top Gun Maverick, like 3 times in a few months.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, I'm done. Now I'm like, oh, maybe I'll catch. No, you know what I mean? Like maybe I'll catch it again, like Top 2 or 3 years. But
and now I'm on. I'll watch it every 2 years.
Now it's like, yeah. All right, Mark. Did you have anything you wanted to add to the Pixar questions? Because I feel like I kind of ran.
Well, I wanted to ask. You mentioned like time periods, and then there was that switch after Toy Story 3. Do you feel like there was an event or a moment after Toy Story 3 where you were like, oh, this is my first negative feeling towards Pixar in a while?
Mark is asking you about Cars 2 right now.
I mean, it's really simple.
Well, maybe I am. That's what I'm asking.
I was the age where I literally graduated high school in 2011. So, Toy Story 3 lined up perfectly. Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows Part 2 literally came out a month after I graduated. So it came out when I was 8, the first one. So those things were lined up perfectly with me. So it doesn't help that, yes, I turned 18 and then I started maybe doing drugs and going to raves and DJing and getting into all these other type of things. And which I still would love movies, but I would do all that stuff. And then on top of that, the next couple Pixar films were kind of like, Brave and Cars 2. And it's like, whatever. Be honest. I mean, it's simple as that.
It takes a while to get to Inside Out. It's like 5 years until Inside Out.
Yeah, honestly, nothing else then really wowed me. What's after those two? I forget. See, I kind of lost track. I can name them all in order.
It goes Cars 2, Brave, Monsters U, and then they took an off year, and then it's Inside Out.
Oh, yeah. Monsters U I liked, but I didn't like it as much as those first 10. It's an enjoyable, fun movie, but it's not that next echelon.
then after Inside Out, it's like all the sequels, and then Coco's just with the sequels. Which
Coco
obviously is like fantastic.
Coco's
like,
the best movie to come out post Toy Story 3, I think, is Coco for sure.
100% agree. I think Coco might be my favorite. Period. Like, you know, like definitely one of those things. Coco, you know, you were saying like we only watch a movie a few times and then it's like we go on a rotation. I think Coco is my most logged movie on Letterboxd. I think it's like at 8 or 9 logs.
Wow, that's low, man.
A lot.
I've got like Jurassic Park at like 23.
Sorry, that's not as much.
23 logs.
Okay, but Jurassic Park. Okay, but Coco came out in 2017. So
that's true.
So, all right. Well then, Mark, if are you done with your questions?
Yes.
I'm also the worst person to then be
will...
like, "Hey guys, I have a hard out. We got to shorten the podcast." Meanwhile, I'm like willing to talk for 7 hours.
Well, yeah, that's why I was like,
well, that's why we want you on here. But I mean, it's all good.
But to answer Mark's question, you didn't ask because he almost always asks. I guess Jay did in fact see Turning Red. So Mark's keeping track of our guests who have seen it because you'd be surprised how many people are like, "What's that?"
I wouldn't be surprised because I went to Disneyland. I didn't see a single Turning Red piece of merch or T-shirt or anything, and I don't know why.
I distinctly remember going to the Disney store after I saw it at the El Cap right next door. They didn't have a single plushie of it, not a single panda plush toy. And I was like, what? How? Like, how does this not exist for this movie? And I literally just walked from the movie to the Disney store.
That makes no sense. Come on, Disney.
Anyway, yeah. So, this is the Letterboxd game, where we try to guess movies based on films that Letterboxd says we might also enjoy. Because they have, I don't know if you noticed, Jay, on Letterboxd they added this bizarre thing at the bottom where it algorithmically says this movie's similar to this. So, for example, if Letterboxd recommends Big Hero 6 and Megamind, the movie you could be trying to guess could be Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, right?
Okay.
I start by giving you the first 5 recommended titles. After every wrong guess, you either get more titles or another hint. Now, I'll leave titles outside of the recommended list if they have the same director of the original film or in the same franchise. So, for Spider-Verse, I would not say Amazing Spider-Man because it's a Spider-Man movie. Nor would I say Rise of the Guardians because it has the same director, Peter Ramsey.
Sure.
With our guests, what we've been doing recently is, when we have guests, we keep it to a movie that's over 100 million. Now, Jay, I know you're a connoisseur of film, so I've actually done the opposite for you. We're going to be the most.
Jesus.
These are like movies from the last 2 months. No. These are movies that I've watched since the beginning of the year, organized by Letterboxd's most popular, but none of them made 100 million. And I will say this right now, I did actually remove the second place one because I'll just tell you what I knew Mark hasn't seen it. I did not. I also just didn't want to do a round on The Whale, so I just was like, we don't need to. We don't need to do
the Whale.
Oh, I didn't want to do The Whale. I'm sorry, but I have 3 rounds. Okay.
Okay.
I'm very curious about what it's a shame. Anyway, go on.
You can play either competitively with Mark or you can play together. It's your choice, Jay.
Up to Mark.
We should do competitively.
Yeah, I like to compete personally.
Now, before we start, I want to give you an example because I do this whenever we do a movie. This is what Ratatouille's 5 similar films would be: is Over the Hedge, Clive a Chance Meatballs, How to Train Your Dragon, Ice Age, and A Bug's Life. So that's like an example round. All right, you ready for round 1? These are in order from how Letterboxd is the most popular to least popular of like the top 3 most popular.
Okay.
That fit in the criteria I said. Okay. I think actually your first round will be the toughest, but we will see how it goes. So, your 5 films are The Atom Project, Free Guy, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, The Matrix Resurrections, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Is it Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Was it what Mark said?
Do you want to just copy that guess, Jay? We'll let you if you want to.
I mean, it sounds like a good guess to me.
All right, we'll let you copy it this time. Normally we don't, but yeah, it is Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I don't have to copy. He got it first. He gets the point. I didn't guess it. He
gets the point.
What are you talking about? I don't get the tie.
I win.
No.
I am king.
Are you ready for round 2?
Yes.
All right, round 2. Your 5 films are Dawn of the Dead, the remake, I Am Legend, Day of the Dead 2008, The Girl with All the Gifts, and World War Z.
Night of the Living Dead?
Whatever that Jim Jarmusch one was called, the zombie movie.
Oh, The Dead Don't Die?
Don't
The
Die.
Dead Don't Die is the Jim Jarmusch. Okay. The original Night of the Living Dead is in the top 25. It's not this movie. And The Dead Don't Die is not in it. So now I'll give you the year this movie came out, okay?
Okay.
This movie came out in 2002.
Ooh, was it 28 days later?
Yeah, I think that's what it is, and he got it first. So I'll give it to him.
Mark gets the point. But we will still play the final round even though Mark won, because we will see if you can get one. You know, that didn't mean to sound as rude as it did. But
I'm going to
we'll
foreshadow a
one.
no, but let's see how it goes.
All right. This one is, your 5 films are, so forget all the ones we just said about zombies. 5 films are Mulholland Drive, All About Eve, Vertigo, Citizen Kane, Inland Empire.
Sunset Boulevard.
I'll just guess another Billy Wilder movie. Some Like It Hot.
Is Some Like It Hot in the top 25? No, it's not, but it doesn't even matter because Jay got it. It is Sunset Boulevard.
Oh, yeah, at least I got one.
Yeah,
Sweeps the
you
leg
did
at
it.
the end.
You did it. The next 5 are very interesting for Sunset Boulevard because it's the Nightmare Alley Guillermo del Toro remake, then Baz Luhrmann's Great Gatsby and Babylon, and then I haven't seen this. I'm sure Jay, you have, but Vanilla Sky. But that one I'm a little like, what? Like, oh, is that similar to Sunset Boulevard? I don't know.
Not really. Maybe in terms of like it's one person's like downfall, but
What a lineup of a movie that 2 of your related films can be Vertigo and Citizen Kane. Like, like, all right.
Shall we
Cool.
talk
That one
about-
really quick. That was like one of our quicker rounds.
that was so bad.
Well,
Well,
I was just blessed by your Facebook feed
Yeah.
earlier on. I mean, I wasn't cheating. I just have had a good week of being aware of your Facebook feed. Let's
Cool.
talk about why we're here. Let's talk about
La la
Ratatouille.
la 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 la.
Danny, can you explain Ratatouille?
I'm opening up the Wikipedia page.
So
while
Ratatouille
singing
is a
the-
film directed by
Ratatouille,
Brad Bird.
a groundbreaker. This is the first movie Pixar ever made where they fired the director and kept going on, which became a bad habit of theirs. Well, I guess we can't really say it was a bad habit because we don't know how the other directors' movies would have turned out. But you know what? In the case of Ratatouille, I think it did work out. Ratatouille is Brad Bird's second movie at Pixar. Kind of crazy he made it just within 3 years of being, doing an Incredibles. But you know what? Very interesting part of its history at the studio is that initially before Pixar was bought by Disney in early 2006, Ratatouille, they were saying, we're going to put this out independently just to see how it goes on our own. Obviously, that did not happen. Disney bought them way beforehand. But it's just think that's this movie of all movies would have had that stake on it of being like, this is the movie that puts Pixar's price tag out there.
Well, have you heard the story about why Bob Iger, the key decision he says made him buy it? I mean, obviously it's more than one thing, but he said he was at Hong Kong Disneyland for the opening of it was September 2005, and it was right before he became CEO. And the opening day parade, they watched it, and all the characters, he said every cheer that got the biggest cheer, it wasn't the Disney characters. They didn't know them in China and stuff. It was the Pixar characters. Everyone loved them. And that's when he realized, he goes, no, Pixar is Disney. And if we don't get Pixar, it's the biggest loss ever. So he made the right decision going after them. And you can feel, I think this movie was like, in some way, I don't know how to explain it, but when I watch it, there's little parts and maybe something visual. It feels like there's a swing there that you can see the remnants of, like, they were making this to not be a Disney movie at one point, kind of in a way. Or there's just something about it that feels like it didn't get the first pass of notes from the first draft of like, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do this. Don't do this. Like I don't know. Something about it feels very original.
I think you see that with both this and WALL-E, where it's like these were both made like initially starting during like that era where they were like, no, yeah, it's just us. We can do whatever we want. And that's why I think both these movies, up to, but not as much, I think both these movies have like an air of sophistication around them that the other Pixar movies don't necessarily have. This movie, of course, was nominated for, it won, of course, animated feature, because Pixar movies like always win it. But then it was also nominated for original score, both sound awards, and screenplay. It's the second most Oscar nominations for an animated film, tied with Up and Toy Story 3, behind Beauty and the Beast and WALL-E. Ratatouille, it's a big movie, right? Like it's a big movie for Pixar. If I remember right, I should have opened the box office, but I remember at the time people saying like this is a little disappointing for Pixar. But the fact is, then you watch the movie, you're like, wow, actually, like the fact that this like made as much money as it did shows the power of the Pixar brand.
That was an exaggeration, though, I always felt like. Because I was thinking about watching, because I don't remember on hand, but looking it up, it was one of those things where, like, two Pixar movies before did, like, 237 and 220, and then Ratatouille did, like, 207, and it's like, okay, it's a movie about a rat. Like, that's, like, how is that? You know, it was one of those things where it was, like, a very minor
It's not from Cars, is it?
It was something like, it still did, like, 600 million worldwide, I thought, plus, right?
Well, yeah, because I think this is one of the better. Again, I should just have it open on like a spreadsheet of all the Pixar money, just so I can have these stats available. But if I remember right, this did really well. Was considered to do really well overseas for 2007 because, like, you know, it's set in Paris, but also like, obviously that the story kind of travels pretty easily. Everyone knows what rats are. Everyone kind of has the same cultural reaction to rats. So
yeah, did I read right that it was the highest grossing film in France and it upset Titanic?
Let's
I know it's one of the most popular.
Well, I have no
films
idea
in
where I
France.
read that, and I didn't take a note about it. So who knows if that was something I imagined or
It
not.
dethroned Titanic for the most consecutive weeks as number one at the box office in France. So not beating Titanic, but like having that stat of being number one for however many weeks Titanic was number one in France. It was the first non-sequel film in 2007 to reach the number one spot since Disturbia. I think that's a fun stat. I've never seen Disturbia. I should probably see it sometime.
Disturbia recommendation. Let's make a Disturbia podcast, okay? I like Disturbia. I'm a fan of Disturbia.
Whoa! Actually, now I actually didn't realize this. Disturbia is written by Christopher Landon, who is recently directing the Happy Death Day movies and Freaky, which I had fun with. You know, like they're decent fun. He has a Netflix movie out that I have no interest in seeing because it looks like top, like, you know, like classic, like, oh, it's a Netflix movie. All right, whatever.
Yeah.
But
I think Disturbia is a little bit better than the films he's made himself. I like Disturbia. But then again, I also saw it when I was
I didn't think it was more of a
13,
comedy. Isn't Disturbia also this pretty like straightforward thriller? Maybe like a couple jokes here and there, but it's not like those movies where they're trying to be comedies.
It's supposed to be like a low rent, like Rear Window for teenagers.
I just remember I remember kind of wanting to see it because I was like around the time, you know, the Transformers ads were out, so it's like, Shia LaBeouf, so cool. And of course, as we talked about in our last episode, Surf's Up, Shia LaBeouf, yeah. So at the time, it was like, cool, like, I want to watch Disturbia. That looks so edgy. I was like 11 when Disturbia came out, so that's the episode. No, I'm kidding.
Well, so we're talking about 2007. Jay, you said you saw it in theaters, didn't you?
I did see it in theaters with my family, my mom and my little sister, who was like 5 at the time.
How did that go? Good?
It went great. I mean, I
well?
remember seeing all the Pixar movies every year with my family, so I remember liking it. I don't know, too much of my out of theater reaction from 17 years ago is not too strong. Or
come on,
Jay. So I want to ask.
I was like, Jay, you had one job, was to go on this podcast and remember exactly your reaction from 2007 to the Ratatouille.
Well, you can for some reason. So people come on and I'm like, I don't know. Do you also have this power? But I wanted to ask, you know, comparing it to when you saw it as a kid versus rewatching it now. Maybe you can compare it to rewatching it today for the show.
Well, this is the problem when I told
differences, or-
Danny, like, Ratatouille is of all the movies. This is one of those of all the Pixar. This is the one film, like, I don't know. I don't really have much thought. Like, every time I've seen it, I feel the exact same way. I feel like my opinion, like, never, like, I just go, yep, that's Ratatouille. Great. Love it. Fantastic. and I like
Jay.
it a lot. And in the very end, the last 25 minutes, I cry. I cried for, like, the last 6 minutes straight. I bawled my eyes out, but I bawl all the time. I cry in movies pretty easy, but... I mean, I cried in Cars 4 times, for like 4 different occasions, for gosh sakes. That Hudson Hornet, man, that makes my tears just sob. But no, I mean, the ending of this movie, when he's reading the review, I'm like, how do you not cry? I mean, come on. I mean, but yeah, I feel bad because so many other movies I would come on here, I'd be comparing and contrasting and runtimes and this and that. Well, if you look at this and if you look at that, and
I
this
actually
movie,
did check runtime sometimes during this because I know you
do.
do. I know you check runtime, so I did check runtimes a couple. I was like, when does On-Time Ego finally like show up in the story proper? When I didn't write any of them down. I should have written them down.
It feels very late. That's what I noticed.
It is late. It's like
Rewatching
it's like the third act actually, when all that stuff kind of hits the fan.
Yeah, it's really incredible. Well, we'll talk about the structure in a little second. But so you're pretty mellow on Reddit. Why did you choose this one to come on?
I mean, I didn't. He tells me
Actually. Okay, cool.
Jay,
no,
I
I'm
didn't
just
just tell
wondering.
you. You gave me like 5 options. I was like, "How about Rat?" And you're like, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah, well, you just said how I said sure. I said I wanted to do one of the ones that came out before Toy Story 3. That was my stipulation, basically.
Okay, yeah.
No, I can love it. And
That's
we'll talk
fair.
about it throughout the whole thing, but I just don't have any grand other thoughts. Broad strokes, the structure is interesting because, like we were talking about, Anton, it's like the second act downfall happens at the beginning of the third act of this movie, kind of structurally in a way. It kind of has an elongated opening because then you kind of have which makes movies feel fresh the longer you can drag something out. So you get to meet the Remy and you spend all that time setting it up, which I think every time you watch, you're like, oh, it's a little longer than you think. And then you get to meet the human characters and you kind of set that all up, and it takes a while for them to get through the whole process of that. So you're kind of just understanding the flow of the movie and the setup, and then you kind of enjoy that for a little bit, and then it's really like I think it's like an hour and 8 when like really stuff starts to like kind of go south. And by that point, there's really only like 40 minutes left in the film, which I guess like is a very tail end of the second act, but it kind of does like two mini downfalls. Like it doesn't have one big one. It kind of has the initial one where he puts him out and he leaves him out for the night, and then he's sorry about it. And then there's like the double stab in the back, or was it before? What's the double stab in the back is what point? I'm trying to think. Because there's a part then where he lets the whole family in. There's another thing that happens.
Yeah,
Well, he lets them in before, but I feel like I don't know if I can think of another time when he really betrays Linguini.
No, but there's like not a betrayal, but there's
kind
like
of betrays him. Linguini's like, you need to get some air, little chef. This is my I have success.
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
think maybe the
Whoa.
answer is that like Remy lets his friends in, or he actually like.
Oh, sorry.
On my second rewatch, he lets his friends in off screen. The first time,
Yes.
it doesn't actually work because he's interrupted by having to like find the will. We don't actually. It's so fascinating.
get- I
They're
don't
left
think
on
he
the
gives
side.
us
We don't know
none
what
of that.
happened to them. Yeah, they just stood there and like, watched him run by, and then just nothing happened.
I just took it as like, they're like, well, I guess it's not gonna work this time. And they came back with the tough guy. I know the tough guys there at that time too, but I think they're just like, yo, what's up? Give it to us now. And he's like, all right, I'll do it. You know what I
But
mean?
what I'm saying is that all happened. It's all implied, and we see in montage that he actually does agree. It's just funny to me that it's like this big moment because he's always struggling with stealing food or not. It happens off screen. It's so interesting.
Well, I don't know if it happens
No,
off screen. I don't think it happens that first time. I think like he goes to get him by himself. They don't follow him. Then the whole letter
Yeah,
thing
I
happens.
would
It
agree.
doesn't imply like maybe they never got in. It doesn't say. And then I think then the montage happens. You see him do it. It's like now it's a thing he's doing for them. But so it's hard. I don't know per se
But
if
the
they
crisis
snuck
of
in
faith.
later or if it did that. I got the idea that they didn't eat that first time from the kitchen.
all right, pause. Mark, where did you first encounter Ratatouille?
Well, I think Ratatouille is one of the Pixar films I've seen the most. And it's interesting because I keep watching this film, but how much it's affected my life is hard to say. I remember seeing it first in theaters, and I think I had the experience that everyone had is like you immediately want to cook things and you feel like you can see the world more clearly and life is bright and beautiful. And then I mean, for me, it was like watching that film and then going home and like fucking shit up on the stove and everything like that, and then just rewatching it probably every few years in different scenarios and having the same experience, and then rewatching it for this podcast too. It's like Ratatouille is a film that gives me that Coco experience of sitting on the curb and just enjoying like the world around me. That's been my experience with Ratatouille. And basically in the same way each time too. I don't want to say that it hasn't affected me outside of watching the film, but it's always like this ideal, beautiful world that you can't access. So I go back to it sometimes to think about what could be, but it's inaccessible because it's a fantasy. But that's been my experience watching Ratatouille. I didn't like become a chef or anything like that,
Sure.
and I didn't like move to France or anything like that. I think that it's even not super related to how I watch most other films. I just really enjoy Ratatouille.
When I was growing up, my parents said that we could always have two birthday parties. Normally birthdays just with the family. But for your 6th birthday party, that's when we're going to have a party at McDonald's, because they have a play place. You can get the, you know what I mean? Like, this is a giant play place there when you're 6. That's really exciting. And you can bring your cake there, and that's where the party is when you're 6. When you're 12, you get to choose what your birthday party is. And my older brother, I don't remember picked it because at that point, I'd already done it, so I don't, it didn't matter to me anymore. But my older brother, when he was 12, picked a bowling alley, like going bowling with the friend's birthday party. Me, I've always liked movies. I've always adored Pixar. And my birthday is July 3rd. This movie came out, I believe, like June 29, June 30, somewhere around there. So, of course, June 29. Of course, my birthday party was going to be, we're all coming together to go watch Ratatouille. So, I
don't want to judge your birthday, but that's kind of weak.
Impressive that I got everyone to go on board
and watch Ratatouille. I feel like that could be a bonus. I feel like you could have said anything to your parents, and I want to watch Ratatouille.
Movie theater tickets are pricey for my parents. I think bowling is actually probably cheaper than my parents taking all my friends to see Ratatouille. I think Ratatouille is probably a bit more pricey.
No.
But you know what? I was 12, so. But anyway, yeah, we all saw Ratatouille. I think I definitely liked it way more than anyone else did. But you know what? When 12 is still the age where you don't really give a shit about what your friends thought of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, at 12, I was sneaking into I was watching like some hard R comedies though, so I would have,
I've always been a big Pixar guy, so I was like, yes, Ratatouille, great, love it. And then I promptly never really watched it again until like maybe like in 2010 or 2011 I watched it again. Still liked it then,
which is ridiculous.
And then weirdly, this is like this is what's crazy.
Well, that's why I know it's your third time, right? So yeah.
Maybe I watched it twice. Like maybe it was on cable once in like my senior year, and I watched a bit of it on Freeform. You know what I mean? Like maybe that happened. Well, I guess it would be ABC Family back then, but that doesn't really matter for the story. But so the reason though I want to point out here is that before this podcast, the last time I tried to run through all the Pixar movies was the build up to Incredibles 2, because I think Incredibles 2 is like their 20th movie. And I was like, oh yeah, is it not? Am I wrong? Oh,
no, I'm Incredibles 2 grade. That's my grade for Incredibles 2. Sorry.
Oh, okay, got it.
Thumbs down.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm gonna watch every Pixar thing up to then, including like the short films, like literally what this podcast is. But I have the Blu-ray of Ratatouille. Okay. Like I weirdly own the Blu. I think it's like one of those first Blu-rays you got, when it was. So I was like, oh yeah, I got Ratatouille. So I pull out my Blu-ray in college of Ratatouille because my senior year of college. I put it in, and for some reason the movie just does not load. And I look at the DVD and the Blu-ray, it's full of scratches. And I'm like, I don't know how this happened, but this sucks. It I click play movie and it's just Remy like doing like the loading screen of the Blu-ray, and it's just Remy doing the hula with like a round of cheese, and it just whenever it just stops and then just goes back to the Disney logo of like the trailers beginning. I'm like, no, and I was like just so upset because at that point, these movies aren't really on streaming anywhere. I couldn't really rent it anywhere, so I was just like, well, shoot, I guess this journey is over. Like I'm done. Because I can't watch Ratatouille right now, and I don't want to like find it. So, damn. And what's weird was I pull out the same Blu-ray yesterday, put it in, and the whole movie works. So I don't know what's wrong.
No, Blu-ray. This is a common misconception people always make about Blu-rays things. You can put a blind Blu-ray and it skips. It's the player that usually has the problems. So as someone who has like a Blu-ray player
I
and
have
an
the
Xbox,
same player.
It goes like I have Mummy Returns on Blu-ray, right?
Oh,
I have seen that movie a gazillion times, and in my old Blu-ray player, it would skip at the same moment, the same 20 seconds, no matter what I did for fucking 9 viewings. I put it in the Xbox, it plays through it perfectly every single time. I put it in that old DVD player, it would skip. There's other movies that like would skip at 1.5 minutes in, never skip again. I put it in the Xbox, wouldn't skip for 5 minutes in, and then an hour and 10 minutes in it skips. But if I put it in the DVD, it wouldn't skip at that time. So I learned that it was like, I think it's the player actually a lot of times that is somehow not reading it right or cleanliness. But yeah, I don't know.
That's what I was confused by, because now I realized that I thought I was watching on the same player, but then I literally just realized when you said that, I was like, oh wait, because this isn't the same player, because in college I used one of my housemates' PS4, yeah, not PS5 yet, PS4s to watch it. So yeah, I guess it was just the PS4 player.
Random.
Now this makes sense. I thought, because I was like, I had the same Blu-ray player in college. What are you talking about, Jay? You're wrong. And I was like, oh wait, no. My roommate had a PS4, so I guess I watched it in the PS4.
So it's also not a scientific thing. It's just me based off having 2 in my house and going back and forth.
I've told this story on this podcast before, but I just remember the time I went back to Family Video and it was like, there's a problem with this Force Awakens Blu-ray. It skips from like if you've seen this movie, and I was like, wait a second, you work at a video store, of course you've seen this movie, and this the clerk's like, yeah, of course I do. I'm like, okay, this is really awkward. So it just doesn't work. It's like, just take it. I'm not gonna explain it. We're just get this out of my hands. But yeah. Anyway, so that's why that's really why I never rewatched, because I tried to rewatch it a couple years back and it just didn't work. So, but now I have finally rewatched Ratatouille on a Blu-ray, not on Disney Plus. So
Obviously, better than I did. I don't have a Blu-ray, so.
Me neither. I have a multi-region player.
Whoa. Hold up, big guy.
Yeah, no, that was a Christmas gift from back when I lived with my parents a while back, and now it's in my apartment here, and it's great. I wanted it. Honestly, can I share a deep cut with you that I don't know your, classic film background or like foreign, obscure shit, but I got it because there was like a box set of Yoshishige Yoshida films.
Okay.
And it was one of those like Arrow releases.
Yeah.
And I mean Arrow, whichever is the UK company, but it was one of those like very deep cut things. And I wanted to get the player for this one box set. And now it's cool to have it in case I ever need it again. It's kind of my main DVD player, but it was funny that I was like, it was at a time when I was so interested in like very obscure Japanese film.
Sure.
And I was like, if I get all these things, then I will be the authority on this person in the Midwest.
You should have started a Midwestern Japanese Film Club podcast.
That should have been my entire ass life. The college I went to did not know what I was talking about. I later found out that the University of Wisconsin is the place that has the big Japanese film studies library.
Wow.
Yeah, that could have been a great change.
What I was going to say also about, region free, have I told you this, Mark? This funny story is that, regions and like Blu-rays is in 2021, my younger brother made the same mistake for my birthday and for Christmas. And that's because he bought me Sound of Metal on Blu-ray from England somehow by accident for my birthday. And I was like, this doesn't work. This won't work with what I got. And it's like, okay. And then that wasn't weird to me, like, because that's like an Amazon movie. So it's like, I get there was no US release. So I understood like the confusion. It's like, oh, this one must work. But then somehow for Christmas, he gave me the Matrix trilogy on a England Blu-ray. And I was like, how'd you mix this one up?
They're cheaper on Amazon sometimes, those UK ones, actually. If you look online, they sometimes come in packs and they're like the wrong region, but they're way cheaper. Like you can buy the 3 Thors for the wrong region from like the UK for like $15.
Yes. But I was just like, well, and that for the Matrix, it kind of worked out because I was like, just get me all 4 because, Blu-rays come out so quick now and that because it was Christmas. So I was like, just wait 2 months and give me all 4 of them just so I have all 4. Yeah, well, I think this is great. It's a great movie. This is great.
Yeah, I would love to dig in a little bit to what we were talking about earlier. Maybe this is related to what we were saying earlier. Maybe it's not. My realization watching this film is that a lot of the themes do not matter in terms of the plot. There are a lot of big speeches, like I'm thinking of especially the time when I was like, when Ratatouille is talking to Gusteau and it's Remy and Gusteau are talking in the trunk of the car and they have this big moment of, oh, I'm all alone and stuff like that. And then they break him out of the car and then he goes back to the restaurant and it's like, well, why did you have that moment of like self-realization when really we're waiting for your family to break you out of the car and their confidence in you is really what makes you go back to the restaurant. It doesn't need to be this big moment where you're like, I know who I am and what I bring to the table. It's like, no, you don't. You still need the family to, change the conditions of the scene for you. And I feel like that's a lot of the film is like...
I actually watched that scene twice. Sorry, I just thought it was funny because that scene played through and then it went on to the next thing and I was like, wait, why is he going anything? And I rewound and I watched that whole conversation with Gusteau twice. And then the second time I was like,
I'm not
okay,
joking. I did the
that
same
makes enough
thing.
sense for me. And
I did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I did the exact same thing. And the reason why I think I did it is because there's a really, he's like, they say I'm a rat. Some people say I don't remember what he says about the other thing. They say like I'm trying to act like a human. I'm trying to act like a rat. And then he leaves. But it's like there's like a solid maybe like 20 seconds like the breakout takes. And then his next line is like, I'm a chef. I'm like, okay. So like I guess that's what this was building to. But at the time I completely forgot what your last lines were because I was busy watching this breakout happen. So like
I'm so glad that you guys are having this experience because normally this is how I am. I cannot listen to the dialogue in a film. And I feel like I missed things. So I'm glad that I watched it twice for this rewatch. But I'm glad that to an extent y'all are with me on this, is that like, if you listen to what these people are saying, it's like, well, you can get there. Like, you understand that he's, he wants to be an artist and he wants to be a chef. But so much of the film has more to do with like the economics of running a restaurant and
but I love
Skinner
that.
story. That's what I love too. I love that the film
like the
flows.
Restaurant.
Yeah,
I just like that this movie has such a like obvious. That's the thing to me where we were talking about like how this feels very like it missed the notes on Disney. Is like this has such a clear love for like chef life. Like it's like here's the process of making food. Here are the people in the kitchen all doing their jobs, and it's just like like I love like it's gorgeously depicted, wonderful colors obviously, but also just like like when he's like, I gotta cook this soup right now. It is exciting because you've seen like everyone else be cooking in this kitchen.
I'm a big fan of process movies, like filmmaking movies, even ones I don't like. Like I just watched Being the Ricardos. Wasn't a great movie, just like an average movie, but I do like just seeing behind the scenes. So that aspect of it always keeps me engaged to an extent because it's what I do. But even cooking movies, any movie about chefs, even if they're bad, I'm always invested to the end and want to see the food and want to see how it gets made. And there's something about that lifestyle and that passion that they have. And I guess you get to visually see it on screen translate. Like you see the passion in someone's face and you're seeing them create. And there's something about that is like inspires everyone to like, even if you're just sitting on the couch watching it, inside we all feel that joy of like, there's something like that I want to do or I have in me, kind of sticks out. So, I mean, who doesn't like watching food movies? I mean, I think and everyone eats food, so there's that bonus there. But like you're saying, there's a level of maturity to it that's why I think it feels like un-Disney in a way where it's just that extra layer of care, like you're saying, into the process and into even the way they characterize people. I mean, they're doing adult humor and mentions things for only adults, but not in a DreamWorks winky way, in a way that feels natural and how she would really feel that way if she was a real chef. Like she would be that, strong-willed and be so determined. And all those people might have a background. It's a tough job. I mean, any job that you go work 12 hours or are able to work in that type of line, there's usually a certain type of experience or background or mindset those people have. And I think it did a good job showcasing that on an adult level and not just like a pure character level, even though they are characters. I don't know. I think that's a tough thing to do.
And a great example of that, like love of kitchenness, is you watch a movie like a Miyazaki film, and the food looks better than you think it would in real life. And that's what I watched on my first watch of this film, again for the podcast. So I watched it once, and this was about a week ago, because I wanted to make the Ratatouille in the ways that Remy does it, and also in the way that Anton Ego does it, because I wanted to know if that last scene made sense. And the secret is basically that it has nothing to do with why the movie works. But I made the Ratatouille the way he does it, and I was like kind of disappointed in it because it didn't look as good as I remembered it looking on the film. And then, this is the craziest thing, and I've never had this happen in a film before, is I went back and watched it the second time, and I noticed they actually did it like the way that I did it. Like, if you look again at how they prepared the food, like, they browned the eggplant, and it's kind of like soggy a little bit, which is how I did it. And they have like the sauce on the side is like they separated the oil from the tomato sauce. And you notice that again the rewatch, and you were like, I was like, this was last night, and I was just thinking like, how did this happen? Like, I completely missed this on the first watch. I'm so caught up in like the magic of this film that I thought it was all cartoony wonderfulness, but they really did like dig into how that was made.
Oh, it's good that you feel that reality in your subconscious. Like when a movie has that in all levels, it's a separation between something good or great or A minus B plus or whatever that is, that subtlety, but like it's there and you feel it throughout. And I guarantee if it's in that one place in the cook, that means it's in probably almost every meal, or everything they do in the kitchen is probably based in reality. And that means that other stuff they're doing throughout the city and the characters are doing are also based in reality. So it gives you that sense of like connectivity, even though it's just subconscious. But like that's why that stuff's important, because if you didn't notice that and they were just throwing something together, there'd be something that would just feel off, especially if you compound that, if there's something every minute that just is not authentic. I mean, I just think, I don't know. Something about movies, I think, compound and I don't know what's the opposite, but like if you're liking something and you're enjoying it, it's
Decompress.
working, it builds on itself, right? If one scene's 1%, if every scene is 1% better, the movie's more than 1% better because it's building upon itself. Versus the opposite, if you don't like something in the beginning, it can start a domino effect down where because you don't like something, you're now noticing other things and liking the film less and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and it's very difficult with Ratatouille, that for me. I think it comes out as all coming together in the end, but it's sort of an anachronistic movie because it is like 50s, 60s, who knows when this film is happening. But like,
I think it's contemporary. I think it's I think it's aiming to be 2007, personally. That's where I'm at with it. It feels like '07 to me. Like, there's a weird old lady who does weird old lady things, but like, you know, she doesn't live in Paris. That's to me. To me, there was no question. I thought this was definitely '07 or '06, whatever you want to say.
Here's the deep Ratatouille thing. Unless I missed them say the date, they say that Gusteau died 2 years before the film happens, and he's doing those black and white. Run
after 2 years.
But then he was being filmed with black and white cameras for his cooking show or that interview with that, and that's why I think they don't want to put it in a year, which I think is clever.
I thought that too at first, but I think
French
it's actually
is difficult.
That the will is expiring. That the will, it's not 2 years after Gusteau's death. I thought it was that, because I got confused too. I'm going back and forth. Is it like actually the will itself has an expiration date? And that, so like Gusteau could have died, and then the will could have worked for 6 or 7 years, and then now that the will's done, it has 2 more years of like arbitration period or something. But that's getting a little too heady and adult. That, like, I also thought, and go back and forth, where like, and during the same movie, this watch, I was like, is it 2 years later? Is it actually years later? I kept debating, and then I said, okay, 2 years. But then you're saying the black and white thing, and I was thinking about 2 in the end credits. I was like, wait, but it was black and white. I think it does a thing like Danny says in a way where it is 2007 to him. I think it works, but it doesn't show a time period. But I think it's a timeless movie, which is good. Like, it's a movie that if you would have watched in 1999, I don't think it would have felt out of place and felt like, oh, they're dressed too weirdly. I think it would have still felt kind of natural and timeless. And I think in 2050, when you watch it, I don't think it will feel too much like you're watching a period piece. I mean, maybe it will, because we will now have like flying cars, but that never happens, right? 35 years from now, no matter how many times people keep predicting it, because stuff's just going to fall on top of us. But so I don't know. I was going back and forth about that. So it's interesting you bring that up. I don't know. And I kept like, but when I came up with the will expiration thing, I thought that's too deep cut. Like, there's no way it's that. It has to be simpler than that. So you have to be right. It has to be some of those.
Thing is also, though, to me, it's like, it definitely also is like, oh, we have a frozen food line now, and it's like, it's huge. So I feel like maybe it ultimately
that's
doesn't
a good
really
point
matter,
too. Yeah, you're right.
Like, how many years after the death it is, but it's like they have that big frozen food line that's like capitalizing him after he died, and I feel like that probably wouldn't fly immediately after he died.
Here's a question: maybe the old lady just has an old TV that's in black and white. Maybe that's a color show.
That's what I took. I just think it's an old lady who lives like in a cottage that feels like it's old, and then when you get to Paris, it's like, it's modern Paris, like. As
a filmmaker, I think it's fun on a podcast to talk this deep, but I try not to because you can do this for any movies you like and not like. Yeah. But as a filmmaker, it's just about making the movie work and sit there and having a pace and enjoyment. So sometimes there might have been a scene, for example, of the Remy having to talk to his friends and say, I can't let you in or do that. But for pace, you just don't need it, or you don't exaggerate. James Cameron talks about this for Avatar 2, if you guys saw it. I was wondering too, where'd the clan go at the end? And I knew there was a scene, he cut it, they didn't need it. And he explains that, they didn't. And as much as you notice it, you still enjoy the movie without it. And you have to trust the filmmaker that sometimes asking more questions or answering more questions actually makes people ask more questions. And sometimes it's better to just ignore stuff, because then people think about it. Like, now that all the Harry Potter stuff is out, people now started going that stuff. People start judging. I hear people complaining about world building in those, and to discount who she is, person, all that stuff. Like, they work because they don't think about it. Like, Harry Potter 1 work because they're not talking about the government. If you don't ask that question, if they mention it, you think about it. But because they don't bring it up till the 4th one or 5th one, you go, oh, yeah, of course there's this government. Oh, and of course there's other schools. Of course there's a World Cup tournament. And it's because the movie's not asking you. But if you tell everybody in the first 20 minutes of Harry Potter 1, by the way, there was a World Cup. By the way, there's a government. It's too much, and you're actually going to be asking too many questions about the functionality of the movie, when all you need is what your character needs to know. And I just think sometimes this stuff falls into that a lot, which is just fun for me to just saying to talk about, because I try as a filmmaker to sometimes avoid this conversation sometimes to just keep myself on what is the audience. I don't think
either of us really think it's like a deal breaker or when does this movie, you know what I mean? Like, you know, it's just like, it's something interesting to think about, you know?
No, of course.
What I wanted to say with this movie is like, I remember, and we're going to do a full episode on this because we cover like everything, but when that Ratatouille viral musical came out, and I watched that more recently than I watched Ratatouille. And I was like, dang, when you put this like into something where it's like they're just singing and explaining the plot in between songs, the plot of Ratatouille is insane. And then I'm watching this, I'm like, yeah, it is really kind of crazy that like, I think this movie probably has the most buy-in that you need as an audience to really go along with it. Because I remember my aunt, this was like when, she doesn't really go to movies much anymore, but I remember when I was a kid, I was like, have you seen Ratatouille? And she's like, yeah, and I hated it. I was like, what? How could you hate Ratatouille? It's like, at the end when all the rats are in the kitchen? No, absolutely not. No. And it's like, okay, like, sure, like, now I'm watching, like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Like, because the rats, one thing I also want to credit to this movie, and I feel like a lot of our animated movies would just say, like, you know, have Remy walk around like he's human, you know? This movie is like, nah, Remy is actually a rat and he's gonna scurry around everywhere, and I'm like, great, like, cool. But specifically what I'm thinking here is like the nonchalant reveal that Linguini can be controlled as a puppet, and we all, like, as a child are like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And now it's like, whoa, what? Like, and we get like a full like Rocky-esque like training montage of him learning how to control him as a puppet. I'm like, this is, now I'm just like, dang, I love that we just like, as a kid, we're like, yeah, that makes sense. When it's like, by far, I think the weirdest thing, and like, as someone who, like, for this podcast has been rewatching all the Pixar movies, this is by far the weirdest story decision they've made so far in any of these movies. Is, yeah, we'll just have him, the second character just be like a puppet.
But that signifies how good the filmmaking is, though. You know, to be able to like tonally achieve that so effortlessly is a very, like, that's something you don't think about when you watch something that's working so well. It's like, it's an impressive tone to handle. But it's funny talking about Linguini. I was thinking about it too, because it's fun that he's blindfolded and it makes sense for the movie. But in reality, you'd be like, you know, if there is a reality version of this, you wouldn't want to blindfold, because you just want to imply. You don't need him to do it blindfold. You just need to be like, reach right, no, reach more right. Oh, he wants the back spice, not the front spice. And it'd be better for him to see so he can learn at the same time. And I thought that watching it, I actually wanted a scene where I thought maybe he should have learned to cook too from her, or they could have learned to cook together. Or the rat could be teaching him, so he has some basic skills in a way. I mean, if he can't even know how fast to stir a sauce, that's something he should learn. And the rat can teach him, no, faster, in a little pan. And it's funny to see him, but that's too cheesy. But I'm just thinking, like, in reality, there's another version where you can make it slightly more realistic. But then on top of that, sorry to go in the thing, I realized Linguini, he's always, as much as I like this movie, and I like Linguini, I don't want to say anything negative about him, but the human character is weaker, and this movie does have two stories. There's like Remy and there's Linguini, and I think because Linguini doesn't do anything, like, it's not like he learns to stand up for himself, but what's his skill set? You know, it's not like he learns to become a good business person, or learns that he wants to be part of the family, or learns that, I mean, he kind of just learns to like, I guess, to interact with people. He gets a girlfriend. Like, I just, like, I don't know what what's his story arc, because it seems like the stuff he's earning is like, Remy's earning it all for him, and what does he learn along the way, and how does he personally grow? And like, he should still have some form of something physical that he needs to do to show growth, or to show that he has a skill set. I don't know. There's just something. I love the movie, but there's just something always a little missing when I watch it. But then the ending is so good. I go, no, it's fantastic. That's what happens every time.
Well, first, I want to like reply to something you said, and then go back to what you're saying, like, with Linguini. But I think Remy doesn't teach him because Remy's an asshole. Like, he's an asshole we like, and like, because you know, he's never been able to do anything. But Remy's like, nah, this guy could never be as good as me, so why would I even bother? Like, he literally, like, I used to always, like, the thing I always quoted this movie as a kid is like, anyone can cook, but that doesn't mean everyone should. You know, like, that's because that's what he says to Gusteau, and he's like, well, don't worry, that's the garbage boy. Which, by the way, Brad Garrett in this movie, something where it's like, oh, I know Brad Garrett now, but I still can't hear him at all in that role. Like, good vocal performance. But anyway, so to me, I'm like, yeah, Remy would not, like, I hear what you're saying, like, yeah, that would be a logical thing for Remy to do, but Remy as a character, like, not wanting to teach him, like, totally buy it. He doesn't really even teach his, like, family. He just orders them around because he's the head chef. He doesn't want to teach them what to do. He's like, no, do this, do this, do this.
You know? He would have to. I don't know how they all know exactly what to do with these machines, but There should have been a scene with like little rat tails in the food. Like all the restaurant gets shut because they think the food's delicious, but there's like dead rats on every plate. Because one fell in the
scene where like he's running around
in
the scene where he's running around when he first gets in the kitchen, he almost gets like baked.
Yeah,
into, like,
can you imagine?
Like, pies or a casserole. It's just like, oh gee. I just immediately imagine like them serving and finding a dead rat in there. Like, oh yeah, that just ends the entire.
And
that ends the restaurant right there.
It has that Toy Story 2 moment, and we could like keep a tally of these where in the first cut it's much more dire than it is in the second cut. I'm talking about when they're in the cones and they're walking across the street, and there's that cut where you see they're about to be crushed, and then in the second, when it cuts, and then you see they've got some time. Good filmmaking.
Trademark.
I wonder how many more of these we could find if we watched more Pixar movies, which I imagine if we did that, you know.
Yeah. But I do want to hear more about the Linguini thing I was bringing up, what you were thinking about, Danny.
Well, one thing I want to say is I get what you're saying, but I think it comes back to what you said where like you cut the things that cause questions.
Yeah.
Because part of me is like at the end, like he becomes a waiter and he has roller skates and it's like, where did these come from? And I'm like, you know, in like the live action Disney remake that over explains everything, he has a whole arc where he wanted to be a rollerblader and he's good at rollerblading. And then at the end he gets to
I just want to work at Sonic and give people food on rollerblades.
Well, even in the movie, they established that he rollerblades when he's out on the date with Colette.
No, it's enough. Yeah, he rollerblades.
But it's not like oh yeah, that's him achieving
that's
his
enough
dream,
setup.
like
No,
being a rollerblader serving
it's
food.
everything that you see is used or used again. That's movie making. You want everything to be not used while set up and paid off. So, but no, you're right.
Agree,
the
but
45-minute longer Disney live action movie where the mother dies of cancer or plague in a small chateau somewhere.
Yeah, we get Remy's mom. We get Remy's mom in the opening of the movie. It's like, oh, and it turns out she's in the rat traps. Yeah. All right.
Also, real side note, they really swing those doors open at the end multiple times that I'm pretty sure you get a good view of that kitchen. Like those doors are swinging wide open, clear view of all those rats.
Well, that's why they got to explain it. They got to do the live action remake where they explain why you can't see inside the kitchen. Right?
There's a little veil there. Yeah. And
if we can shift topics, I want to talk about Colette in this because one part of this, like, I've never really tracked Colette while watching, and I wasn't really like, you know, like watching this movie like I want to see how Colette fits in this story because it's just that now I'm an adult and it's not like she's like, oh, it's the girl character. You know, when you're a kid, you're just like, oh, it's the girl. Who cares? Mm-hmm. Now you're adult. You're like, all these characters matter. I think she has like more. I don't know if I can really describe her arc to you that she learns anything, but I think for some reason to me the part that got me crying a bit before, obviously the critic stuff got me crying too. But when Colette's like, all right, Remy, show me what you got. I was just like, oh, I love that they're actually like working together and respecting each other. Like it got me very emotional. Yeah. That it's like, cause this entire movie, she's like being I don't want to say she's off Linguini because obviously she likes Linguini, but she's like clearly jealous of him. But as soon as like she accepts that there's a rat who's a great cook, she's like, all right, let's work together because we've both like been told we don't belong in this kitchen. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I kind of like that a lot. Like I find it very beautiful and it's very quickly there, but it's like, that's the good stuff right there. Like that these two are just working together and it's like she immediately respects him once she accepts that I guess a rat can cook. Yeah. Sure.
No, it's a good moment. Even when she's on the bike and she sees the book, like that makes me smile. That's a heart tingling moment. It's simple. I mean, it's obvious, but it's like, no, you need it. And it's a good little full circle moment. And she comes in at the right time when you need her. And I think she's probably the most interesting human character. Yeah,
she really is what drives that more than Linguini for me. Because Linguini is in a literal sense, a device for Remy to function. Whereas Colette is like an actual, like, not really, she's obviously not the antagonist, but she's like giving like Remy a little pole push. And Remy is like, I refuse to respect you. And it's like, okay, like, because Linguini's got the points like, yeah, Colette does know what she's talking about. It's just, she's also like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
When he's trying to, he doesn't want to get her spices. He's like, no, I know best. There's those scenes, those little moments where Remy doesn't respect the other people. They're below him or not as smart as him or whatever, or as good as cooking.
I think it's very interesting that I think we all agree that she's a great character and she doesn't have an arc. You know, what's up with that?
I think she has more of an arc than Linguini, though, is the thing. I think she does have... it's something where it's like, she sticks up for Linguini first, saying, like, he said anyone can cook, and then she kind of forgets that when she's put in charge of him because she's annoyed at the entire situation. And then by the end, she's like, no, you're right, anyone can cook, and I need to help others to get to the point where I got.
On top of that, she
Even if it means
loosely
helping this rat.
learns to be more creative. She's a little too like stickler to stick to the recipe, I guess. And by the end, she's like embracing. It's not like explicit, but she's embraced the idea to be more open to change things or do new things or be creative. Or
I definitely think that also relates to like the fear, right? The fear of being somewhat like an outsider in the kitchen, right? And then she sees like Remy's like Remy's like, because initially, Linguini's just a upstart dude. I'm gonna drop the joke that well, it's not really a joke, but I'm sure people have made this joke. He's like, Linguini ends up being a nepo baby, because but she's like, this is this guy who shows up in her kitchen, dude, immediately promoted from garbage boy to cook, and she's put in charge of him.
Yeah.
And like she's immediately like mad about that. But then she's like, oh wait, I've been like helping a rat of all people, like an actual rat, and it's like, what? Like I think she gets to that point where she realizes that if Remy can take risks on his recipes, then I mean we don't actually get that in the movie, but I think that you're right. She learns that she can do that from Remy. And I think that's a little beautiful part of it, because I think she learns way more from Remy.
Well, because she straight up asked, like, how would you do it? Because he doesn't want to look at the recipe for Ratatouille. He kind of wants to make it himself. And then she's like, although I will say, side note, funny, the frozen food thing, I mean, that's a moneymaker, though. You got one restaurant. How much money are you really pulling in from Gusteau's from one restaurant? I mean, I don't know, a lot of frozen. If you're selling millions of frozen burritos, listen, you may sell out for something.
Well, what's good about the frozen food to me, is
we're not going to sell out. We don't want to sell millions of burritos. Like, I don't know, that's a bad business decision.
The payoff of the Gusteau's, like all like having the dumb accents.
Yeah.
the office is like, that's great.
Oh, and they're smart too. I know it's not to be, but they like avoid doing the Asian because that would have been like a step too far. Like he's there, he never says anything. They're like jump. They're like, no, he's Irish. No, he can. Oh, we can have him be like Latino. Okay, we'll have him do that. Just have him stand there. We don't want that one.
Crazy that came out in 2007, and they had the foresight to do that.
Imagine if they did. Imagine if that scene had a little moment.
They'd be like, ooh, Ratatouille aged poorly.
Because we've all accepted, like,
then
you can make fun of it. You can do a little Italian
like,
accent. No one's going to get mad if I go,
and then like everything everyone at once would have like this like narrative. It's like, oh, we're racially reclaiming Ratatouille. like they would have that entire thing about it.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the elephant in the room, I think, which we're all kind of mentioning, is that Remy is such an ass. And he is not redeemed. I gotta say, watching it, I don't really care. But like, I put it out to all of you. Why don't we care?
I think we don't care because I think all three of us would say we are on the artistic side of things. So I think we can all relate to Remy, all three of us. But I know like there's a couple friends I know who hate this movie. And it is because what you say, he is an asshole. It's like he's a pretentious snob, and like he does not like. I don't care what he's saying about food. That's not how food works. I'm like, no, because that to me is like you're refusing to engage with the premise of this is high dining. Like like you can't be like, oh, he's just it's the world he wants to be in. So like he's acting the way he should. Yes, he's an asshole, but like he wanted to become a cook, and they made him a poison tester because he showed he was good at it. Like I think his lashing out is like. When we see his family life, even though he's like, yeah, I still love my family, but it's like he's not allowed to like do what he wants to do when he's with his family. I think Linguini becomes an asshole too, and it's like I think Remy. I think the movie's very smart that whenever Remy's becoming a bit too much of an asshole, it's like here's Skinner or here's Linguini becoming a huge dick. It's like I don't think he's ever. I think there are points, but I don't think he's ever consistently the biggest jerk on screen.
Yeah,
you're right. He doesn't have an arc, and I guess he's kind of a jerk. But a couple of things of that is. I mean, he's a cute rat, you want to follow him, but it's kind of part of you attach him because he's an outsider, right? Like, even though he's a rat, it's a placeholder for any person who feels outside or minority or feels that they can't, get ahead
like
or anything.
Colette, like how Colette relates to him.
Exactly. So I feel like anyone can watch that, and especially as a kid, right? They attach themselves to that. And it's easy to look over that sense because he's passionate about it, and he's so skilled, and he comes from the bottom, if you will, because he's a rat and there's a 0% chance he can achieve this. So there's that natural sense of like rooting for an underdog, even if he is kind of an asshole. And then side note, going on a deeper level, like a filmmaking perspective, this is my belief. This is how I made even like my movie Northwood Pie. Like, the main character in my movie is the weakest character movie. And I know we knew that the whole time writing and everything. And it's like, it was always that way. And they're like, how do you know he's a lead? I've always just said there's a certain point in a movie where people just know to attach. And if I have this character and I make sure it's from his perspective, I just have him go to this many scenes in this order and this kind of pace, you're just going to be like, that's the person I follow. And I can have a movie and I can open it and I can have someone murder 45 good human beings, innocent people. And yet I can have a scene 5 minutes later where I'm scared for his life because he's getting chased, because the tension. And it's just a weird thing that, like, our minds, the way we work when we watch things and how we just attach to, we see that close up and we see their point of view and we're them. And if you can, do a movie right, you put yourself in whoever shoes that is, whether they're an asshole, a good person, a bad person, and you can enjoy it. And if it's a bad movie, then yes, that's one of the big reasons it doesn't work. But it shows that you can make a good movie without having a good arc, without having a great character. Because you're right. If you think about it, he is kind of a dick. I never really thought about that too much. And you could make maybe a better version where he has a better arc or something, but the movie works so well that you don't necessarily think about it too often. I mean, some people do, but
I hate to be like, well, the thing about him being a dick is, like, it's realistic, and, like, that part of it's really like, okay, yeah, sure. And the thing is the arc is more, maybe I don't want to say I'm speaking for everyone here, but I think it's a pretty universal feeling with animated movies in general and movies in general that like, this movie is at its heart kind of about daddy issues, right? Like, dad doesn't understand what son wants to become. Like, and, like, How to Train Your Dragon does that too. It's a very standard animation trope. But also, it's like, I'm thinking even this year with, like, the Fabelmans, right? Dad doesn't understand what little Sammy wants to do with his life. And I watch the Fabelmans and I watch this and I think about, like, my own relationship with my dad when I've been like, I want to do this thing, and or my mom, parents in general, being like, I want to do this thing. They're like, yeah, but that's not going to be good for you. That's not going to help you make money. And it's just like, great, thanks. Like, thanks for the support. And I think that is, like, your gateway with Remy. It's like, because dad's like, that's dumb. Brother's like, I'm trying to understand, but I still don't really get what you're doing. And then he finally finds himself in a world where he can just do what he wants to do. And that gives him a freedom that is completely, like, new and exciting to him. And I think that is, but the thing is, you still don't want to lose your family. So it's like, the arc, in a way, doesn't need to be Remy's. It needs to be the people around him understanding how much he loves what he loves.
Yeah, I would second that. Maybe you're implying this, Danny, but so much of the movie works because I find Django, and I actually find Skinner too, to be pretty compelling. We've kind of talked about this. Their motivations make a lot of sense. And it is like, well, if you want Remy to not be an asshole, you kind of got to write a different movie, because his antagonists just make so much sense. And it seems like, he doesn't need to be an asshole, but he doesn't need to change. He needs to be validated, because then he can stop being a jerk, because he won't feel like he needs to prove himself.
Well, Linguini's also a good guy too, and if he's a good guy, there needs to be conflict it's Disney without being, like, extreme conflict. So they have to have just that natural personality bump kind of thing that kind of toes the line. So if Remy was nice, they wouldn't really be able to have so much of a twist. Maybe they made him nicer and Luigi was meaner. Then people didn't care about the human character and didn't want to root for Linguini to get the restaurant and do all that stuff. So they had to make him as nice as possible. And then that, in return, in the filmmaking, they had to tone down and make the rat a little more mean. I could see that happening.
Again, though, Linguini is still just used as really I like using the term story device, because he is a device for Remy, but, like, he's a tool for Remy.
Yeah.
Because when Linguini gets the restaurant, that effectively means Remy has the restaurant, right?
Right, yeah,
because
exactly.
Remy's the cook. I do think Remy cares about Linguini. Like he trusts him. He respects him as a person. He's like, he's a little annoyed with some things about him, but, like, everyone gets a little annoyed when you have, like, a business partner like that.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, because at the end, he's coming back for himself. It's, and I guess you could have made it, there could have been a moment or somehow build it where when he comes back, he does something for Linguini, or he's coming back because he needs, for his friendship, and Linguini needs him to do this. Like, there could have been a way to phrase it somehow that ties it in more strong that way, because it is really just like, he is going back to help his friend, but it's like, is he?
I don't like to use the word irrational, but I do feel like we said earlier, it's one of the strengths of this film is that the plot just kind of moves. And if you think about it, it's like, well, how did they reason this out? But it is like, well, you wanted to go back and help his friend.
But it's the thing is, he doesn't even want to come out. He wants to prove to Anton Ego that he's not just like a hotshot, you know? Like, it's really like, it's my, I need to win. I need to beat this guy, kind of.
And he wants to like restore Gusteau's legacy. I mean, I guess there is. It's funny because the ending is so good, but if you think about it, I guess there could have been even a better moment of like, I have to do this not only for myself, but for Linguini and for Gusteau and for that. But it's really just for himself, kind of.
We didn't really talk about Anton Ego yet. Like, you know, we definitely like, here's when he shows up. He's
hard to talk about. He's not in the movie. He shows up. He's got his own agenda at the end that has very little to do with explicitly Remy becoming a chef and all that.
One thing I do on this show is I always call, and I know I mentioned another line earlier, but I always call it the most like quoted line of this movie. Because, you know, when you're a kid, you repeat lines from the movies you see. And I always go, I still to this day go, I don't like it. I know. I don't like food. I love it. If I don't love it, I don't swallow it.
Which already, it's like, wait a second. If you don't swallow your food, how can you judge the aftertaste? How can you tell how it sits in your throat? You sound like a pretty bad critic. Which is why, as a maker, it's like hard to trust critics. Man, you guys really need to learn a couple notches. I mean, come on, swallow at least one swallow. I mean,
I was saying to Jay before he came on that Ratatouille was a good pick because I think I definitely identify way more as a film critic than as a filmmaker nowadays. Maybe when I was in college, I made movies a little bit, but I was really more like, you know, I enjoyed making plays more, and I enjoy watching movies and reviewing movies. So this is our dynamic. Me and Jay is like, I'm the critic here. You are the filmmaker, and Mark's like, oh, I'm an actor. How's it going?
Well, I like that you gave me a voice, so it's like, yeah, Mark's here, you know, fucking whatever he does.
I'm just teasing about the ego thing, though. It works for the movie. It's a great line, and you would never change that. It's just fun to dissect and say, like, hey, seriously, that. But I like this movie, too, for that reason of, like, I actually always, to me, relate filmmaking to cooking the most. Like, when I have to relate it to a profession or anything, I always relate it to being a chef, being a director a lot of times, and in the balance of objectivity and subjectivity, I think food is a really good way to do things because things are subjective, but they're also clearly objective. Like if one steak is cooked medium rare and is pink throughout, and one steak is burnt and there's no pink throughout, one is cooked longer, one is cooked more. Like your taste can be subjective. Like you can subjectively have a thing, but if one person says, I like this more because it's medium, you can't say like, no, it's not medium. No, I mean, you can like it less because you like, you know, pink. That's fine, but it doesn't change the objectiveness of that core thing in a way. And again, everything's fully subjective because there's so many millions of points and they all come together and we all have different taste buds and different point of views. But in some way, there is some level of hierarchy of what's good, what's bad, and criticism. It somehow feels similar to me, and I've always kind of related it. And maybe it's because I've always enjoyed cooking shows and enjoyed chefs and enjoyed food, but I've always kind of looked at that and compared that medium, I guess, and how people talk about it and discuss it, similar to filmmaking. So I've always found that connection there.
It's really funny for Pixar to do like a movie that's commentating on like film critics that are cynical because it's like, dude, your movies are always loved. You know, at this point, it's like, and Brad Bird is only not Pixar thing is Iron Giant, another like universally beloved film. So at this point, at least. So it's like the idea of like coming here and be like, yeah, these critics, right? But I don't think Anton is that. And I think there's even though I know you made the joke, and it is a joke, you said it was a joke, but it's like, I think Anton is like very much like, he's a scary critic, but
he's more like me and how Ben tough. I'm the toughest one in terms of letterbox grading. If anything, I feel like him personally inside. Except I actually do enjoy everything.
But like, I think one line that always resonates with him in his speech, and there's so many lines that resonate, but where he goes like, it's I don't remember the exact. I'm like, this line's great. I don't remember the exact line, but it's like negative criticism, which is fun to. It's like easy to write and fun to read, or something like that.
Fun to write and fun to read.
And I'm like, you know.
It's so good.
Yeah,
it's so
and
good
I was like, you know, the other
that.
day I watched the Oscar shorts because I always do that, and there was one documentary that I hated, and I was like so proud of my final line. I kept sending it to people. I was like, and I was just like, dang, I like it is fun to write, and it was my line, by the way, was like, you know, I feel like I could have just controlled F her Wikipedia page and learned way more about her than this documentary taught me. Like I was like, ooh, that's good. But I'm like, well, the entire final speech, you know, it's wonderful. Like obviously, we've said it multiple. Like it's just a really beautiful take on like, because you know, people nowadays you see all this discourse everywhere. It's like, oh, critics are getting paid off, or like, oh, critics put the hit on Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
This is funny to me because critics have never been nicer and easier to please than now, which is the funniest thing when people get mad about stuff, because every movie gets great reviews.
47% for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is a very high Rotten Tomatoes score for
Again, movies like The Mummy were getting 53% in 1999 when they came out. Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest got like a 49 or something. It's like, relax, people.
Or like, you know, like how there was like a bunch of critics who put out like their favorite movies of last year, right? And everyone's like, oh, not everyone, but like there's an entire contingent like, know everything ever all at once, throw that list out. And it's just like, what happened where we're like, we look to critics now to validate our takes instead of just like actually give us some good writing, you know? That's really it. It's like, I'm more excited when like a writer I like gives a positive review to something I hated, or a negative review to something like I like. And so I can read their opinion on it and be like, okay, I see where you're coming from, or like, that's an interesting point to make. I think Anton Ego is given like the respect. It's not like, say, and I think you like this movie that I'm about to mention. It's not like in Birdman where like the critic shows up and like Michael Keaton yells at the critic for being a piece of shit for 5 minutes, and then like the critic leaves. It's like, this movie's like, nah, like the critics have their place in consuming art.
Well, I think it makes an interesting point. My favorite thing about the critic thing actually is the speech. It's nice and concise, movie perfect writing. But he talks about how, you know, from our job is easy, and sometimes we have this place where we put ourselves above people who like work so hard and do this stuff to provide that. And at the end of the day, what we do is meaningless. And I like what he said, that because it's true in a way, right? And just like anything you make is meaningless. But then he shifts it into the perfect sense of what the importance of a critic and stuff like that. Because then he goes into their job sometimes is to champion and to highlight lesser known and to see that. And that's part of, and so he's able to like say that perfect dichotomy, like, yes, sometimes we can be too much this, but we also have an important thing to like let people see things that other people wouldn't notice, and we actually make people successful or good or bring them to light or stuff like that. So I thought it's just really perfectly written.
That entire sequence, you know, like with him waiting for, like, from him tasting the Ratatouille, it's like my eyes are watered. I'm not full cry yet, but then when he goes like, we champion the new, that's when I just like, like it all just starts coming out like a lot, where it's like, yes, that's exactly like what like this, because you know that's the point where like you're watching and you're like, the whole movie makes sense, right? Because of course Remy, like, he is a new chef. Of course Colette, like that to me is like the thing I mentioned earlier where Colette and Remy are working together. It's like they're working together to make something new. Two chefs, because she says like women chefs aren't allowed in the kitchen much in this high dining world, and obviously a rat is not allowed in the kitchen in a high dining world, and yet they work together to make something that completely wows the toughest critic ever, because they remember that like what really matters ultimately with anything is really like, this podcast is called Looking for the Ocean because of a quote from Soul, but we've talked more about what I've called the Ratatouille moment on this show, where we watch these movies and revisit these movies to remember stuff from our lives, and like moments where it's like, where like, you know, we taste the Ratatouille.
Yeah, and we get sent back to our childhood or whatever. Sure.
Yeah, we get sent back to our child. We get sent back to like maybe traumatic moments, but like in a good sense, where it's like, oh yeah, this movie's letting me process that, and like that entire thing where he's like, we champion the new, we champion what hits us, and it's like, yes, like, thank you. Like, thank you. Like, it's not even just about criticism. It's about, like, the role of art in lives in general. Yeah. Like, you don't have to be a critic to understand what he's saying and go along with it. I just think it's beautiful. We all agree.
Yeah. It's hard to think of something that's not, like, you know, Roger Ebert writing about it or whatever. It's hard to think of another piece of media that has influenced my view of criticism as much. I'm maybe a lot of people are like that, is like that monologue kind of sums up everything, you know, and we were introduced to it from a Pixar movie.
I remember at the time, although I was a kid, so I guess I can't really be like, oh yeah, this was definitely serious. But I remember, like, you know, I'm on my internet, on TV.com, on ToonZone.net, you know, like on all the weird like spots you start in the internet when you're 12 years old. And I remember people being like, Disney might put together a supporting actor campaign for Peter O'Toole because of that speech, and I'm like, no way did that actually. I wasn't there for it. I can't. But like, I also am like, yeah, I kind of get it because
good.
he never
it's
won,
and
like
delivers.
that speech is so good.
Yeah, and it's a difficult it's a difficult speech too, because I know probably not difficult for Peter O'Toole, or sit down, you figure it out. But like the rest of the film, you kind of have to make some leaps from sentence to sentence. I think I paused and rewatched it once, because it's like the moment that he shifts from the joke about fun to write and fun to read, and then he has to switch to but there does come a time when a critic has to stand up for what is right, and he has to like recontextualize what he's just said, which is so light and breezy, but you realize it's all been like foundation. Incredible delivery. Weird example, but like Alec Baldwin and Glengarry Glen Ross.
The difference between Glengarry and Glen Ross is here is that the rest of Ratatouille is really. I don't hate Glengarry and Glen Ross, but I think Ratatouille is a better movie. I'll put it that way. I don't hate Glengarry. I think it's fine. But this is just like, it blows away everything you've seen beforehand, and like everything beforehand has been incredibly good.
It's always good to end on a strong note, that's for sure. But I want to talk about a couple things before running top. Like, I want to talk about the action set pieces, which is it's an animated film, but like the two major ones that I think about, they're just so fun and well directed. I mean, the one where obviously the first one where he's in the kitchen, and they made a ride off of that. If you've been to Disneyland Paris or to Epcot, they have it now, and I went on it, and when he's running through the kitchen, does such a good job of like just the way he was climbing up and down, and he almost makes. Then he gets.
That's such a cool idea to make that a ride. Like I wouldn't think of it immediately to be like a ride, but it like that makes. Like once you say it's like okay. Like,
no, because you're the size of a mouse, and you go to a screen, and then you get under, and you go into the like kitchen, and all the things are massive size and look big in scale, and then you get like swept and pushed underneath like an oven, and the oven and it gets warm, So it's a pretty fun little ride, but that whole sequence is like super well directed, and the clarity of where you are in the kitchen and going around is really impressive. And then the other little bit where he has the notes in his hand. Like, just that whole sequence is so great. And I love watching movies and, like, keeping notes, like this time, too, of checking off shots that I'm 1,000% going to steal. Like, it's such a simple shot, but there's that shot where, what is the guy's name, the first chef, the chef who was the sous chef to Gusteau, who's the villain of the movie?
Oh, Skinner.
So Skinner, like, it's his hand, and he's almost about to grab like Remy. He's like reaching for Remy, for the thing, and then he falls down the stairs and the steps, and they appear, and I'm like, I want to do that shot in live action. Like if I did a Bond movie or Indiana Jones, whatever, I'm gonna rip off that moment where the villain, I'm gonna make sure you get his point of view. The henchman's reaching for something, and then he goes off a cliff or he goes off the edge of a building, and I'm gonna literally do the same gag. And I just love watching movies, and like I pull up my phone and I go, okay, I have a list of like different movies I'm like writing or stuff, and I have like adventure movie or action movie, and I just write down like little gags, because every gag you see in a movie has been done another gag 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 10 years ago, and no one's gonna remember. No one's gonna watch that and be like, and if someone does, it'll just trend on Twitter in a good way, and people be like, look, he copied Ratatouille.
Can I ask you maybe an obvious question with an obvious answer? Have you seen the Every Frame of Painting about Satoshi Kon?
Not seen. I've only seen a couple of Every Frame of Painting. I should watch the rest of them.
Oh, well, you live in an idyllic world. That's like,
it's like they're actually terrible.
Well, no, they're not actually terrible. I think he opened a can of worms, which set the internet on fire.
Oh yeah.
I actually really like his
video
first.
essays, I think now. Yeah, but that's the whole different thing.
Anyway, he has a video where he talks about like the possibilities of animation editing. I feel like a young filmmaker has to come up a lot with against that, is that you watch a lot of things from animation you want to take to live action, which are actually kind of difficult. I would be curious to see how you could do something like that, because the thesis of that video that I'm quoting is that the eye processes things easier in animation, and so cuts that are jarring like that are much easier. But I don't know what you think about that.
That specific beat I know I can do in live action, but there's a lot of stuff in general when you watch the movie. That's why, again, animation's so perfect and so tough with live action stuff. Like tonally is like just the beginning, just when Remy tastes food and you zoom out, or you not zoom out, you fade into like his own little perspective where it's a black world and you see colors stuff, that's so hard to do live action.
And the music hits it
and
too.
To be able to just transition your perspective like that is so fucking difficult. And you can imagine 9 out of 10 directors, it'd be so hard. Even the best director could fail at just trying to articulate that moment. But in animation, it's still hard, but you can do stuff like that I think that's the type of stuff that's really hard to translate. But I think little action beats and stuff, there's ways to reframe things or rejuggle things or shoot things in certain, certain perspectives or certain lenses and stuff like that. Like that little gag where he goes off, I can do, but the stuff where he tastes flavors and stuff, that's another question. I wouldn't try that. And there's a few other things, like even zooming into Ego's eye. I mean, pulling that off, if you wanted to do that in live action, you'd have to do it completely different. You'd have to do like, he'd put his fork down and you just cut to him as a kid or something. It would be hard to do some type of stylistic transition and not, because if it doesn't work, it's like cheesy, right? And then it takes you out the movie, and that's the risk you're at.
I'm curious, Jay, because I know you watch these all way more like paying attention to like the shots than I do, and I'm sure you've watched them all in a row. But have you ever watched? Because I know you wanted to come on for this one too, but I already have my parents booked for it. Spoiler alert for our guest. But for Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol, I'm curious. Do you notice that Brad Bird like lifted any of like his animation shots either from this or The Incredibles and like tried to pull them off in live action there?
You know,
Or have you just not done that?
I've never analyzed directly Brad Bird's connection to that. I've usually just compared the movies themselves, like the missions.
Because he has live action works, like that. You know?
I mean, I feel like there's similarities there, and I think that in the way he moves the camera, he does move the camera similarly. I can't spell out specific shots, but he has this flowiness to his camera. Like if you watch Ghost Protocol, he doesn't do like Christopher Coriano stuff. He's a little more angular with his shots, and if he does do stuff, there's a lot more blocking readjustments or like a pan or adjustment or something. But he's really like, you don't notice the camera moves. The camera's is never the star of it. The moves are very fluid and simple and guided, and usually there's like one blocking move in it, but it's not showy. He's never trying to be like, oh, there was 4 shots in one and you notice it. It's just one simple kind of, and I think he learned that from animation coming in, because it's a very stickler. But see, I could talk all day about comparing Ghost Protocol though to some of the other ones, because it's interesting. I won't go into too much, but Chris McQuarrie wrote 4 and directed 5. And if you look at the structure of those movies and directing, you can really compare some things. And this is why I think Brad Bird's a great director, and I love Ghost Protocol. I'll stop. I can go on like a whole 5-minute tangent comparing these two scenes that are the same scene.
You can go on a tangent because.
All right, I'll do a quick little tangent.
Are you okay with going?
In 4,
you're allowed to, unless Mark's like, no.
In Mission Impossible 4
No, I
and
think it's
5.
good. We can't like bring you back on for the parent episode, which would be very funny. But no, you should tell it now.
You're talking to my parents. It's just like, no, here's how it goes.
It's a quick anecdote, but it's something as a filmmaker like I analyze. But so in Mission Impossible 4, there's that, and 5, they had the same point at the same story. But I can pull it up on Letterboxd, but I won't do it exactly at the runtimes. But at the end of the first, it's like elongated first act almost, basically, but it's actually the start of the second, where they jump from location to location. So in this 4th movie, they jump to Dubai or Abu Dhabi, and in the 5th movie, they go to Morocco. And both those scenes before are the same. So like one happens at 49 minutes and one happens at 48 in the story. So at the same point in the story, structure and pacing wise, do they happen? It's the same script. And both scenes, in one of them, they go to a train, and it's an IMF hideout where they learn stuff, and the other one, it's a boat. And after those scenes, they cut to, a desert landscape and transition shots and stuff. But I compared it side by side, not a knock on Chris McQuarrie, but why 4 is so good is if you look at the beat to get out of 5, it's the simple like Morocco, and then Tom Cruise says that with a little like joke, and then you cut and you get the beautiful landscape of Morocco. But in Mission Impossible 4, they do this great little tag on where they're literally grabbing every single piece of equipment they're going to use in that next set piece. So it's already setting something up. Mm-hmm. And even if something is the gloves, they grab the goggles that they're going to use later for the sandstorm. So it's just a little bit extra there. And then on top of that, when you cut back into the transitions up to foreign landscape in Morocco, you get 3 or 4 establishing shots of Morocco, and it fades out. But what they do so brilliantly in 4, he does the Jurassic Park effect, where he's able to wow you twice, and it takes twice as long. He wows you. You go, wow, look at the desert, and you show them driving for 4 shots, and then you cut inside the car, and you have a fun little gag where they avoid the camel, they smile, and then he wows you again, because now the music was up, it went down, they played a gag, and then it went back up for you approaching the Dubai building, the tallest building in the world. Which, like Jurassic Park, you wow at the island, then you go in, you do a little joke with the helicopter with the seatbelt, and then you wow again. The music comes up when the waterfall comes. Small thing, I know it's a little thing, but both those beats side by side, one takes twice as long, and yet you're more engaged. And I think that it has more setup, more payoff, more that. And I think that you can do that for a lot of scenes. I know it's not really relatable, but that just shows how I see movies and when I go back and rewatch things. Because if you just watch something 2 months later, 3 months later, not think about that. But when you watch them the same day, or you stop, or you look at the runtime and you analyze, you start noticing things like that. And you see objectivities That doesn't mean one movie is better than the other, but you can point out why that one moment maybe works for you more, or why you can find that. And when I find an objective thing or something like that, it doesn't necessarily, it holds, but my opinion can still change. Like my Batman opinions and Christopher Nolan Batmans have swapped completely. What I used to think was 1, 2, and 3, now I have the opposite order. But the things I've noticed, even when I had other opinions, haven't changed. But I've just, because I know, oh, that part's better, it helps me find out something else. Like now I'm looking from a different perspective. Like maybe I'm looking too hard from an editing perspective, and now the next time I watch it, I'm watching from a script perspective, and I notice all these other objective positives for another movie. Anyway, sorry for going on a tangent, Mission Impossible, but I just love that correlation between 4 and 5 because they're the same exact beat, and I think that shows like what directing can do and how much, you know, how, because the script could be the exact same for both those moments. Sorry, that's probably boring most audiences, but there's hopefully one person that finds it interesting.
I think it's interesting.
Well, yeah, we find it interesting. That's what's important.
Listeners, I don't care about them. No, you know.
No, I think the one time someone was a listener and they came on, it was Caleb, and he said he liked our Femtober episode. So the vocal members of our audience like the technical talk. Did you have another thing that was on your mind, Jay?
Oh, I just want to talk about the score again, because I know every time I go on a podcast talk about any movie, even when I did it every once in a while, like you always forget the music. You want to talk about it so much, and you want to be the last thing you talk about, and you always forget. I didn't want to forget because it's amazing, and I feel like I cry because of the music sometimes. I mean, we forget how much the score drives movies and our emotion, and it's like sometimes I forget, like, is the movie good or is the music just so good? Like, is Steven Spielberg my favorite filmmaker, or is John Williams just the best?
The way the music swells at the end, like the epilogue in the restaurant where he's like, surprise me, it's like, that's beautiful. In a way, actually, the ending of this, weirdly, like musically, even though obviously they're completely different tracks, but the role for Michael Giacchino, it reminds me of how Coco always just makes me cry at the end because of the music that's playing. It doesn't really have to do with what I'm singing on screen. It's just like the song Miguel is singing is like so happy. I'm like, they earned this. They worked so hard for this, and they're all happy now, and I'm so happy that they're happy. And that's how I feel like when the music, like you get the choral, it's not a choral track, but you know, like the vocal track on the final song. It's like, this is so nice. It's like restaurant music, and they really made this restaurant with the rat on the thing. So, it's just so nice, you know? Like, yeah, I agree. Yeah. The score here is phenomenal. I think Giacchino more recently has not been as impressing me as he has, like with like, you know, revisiting Incredibles and now.
Well, when you do 6 movies a year, 6 shows, like that's the problem. I mean, you would go from doing 2 things a year or 3 things a year to doing 6 or 7 or 8. You know, it's like the Hans Zimmer effect, not a negative. These guys just become too sought after, and I get it. Like if I was doing a blockbuster, on the top of my head, I mean, maybe there's people who do more, but there's only 3 people I'm like fully confident in that I would sign on without hearing anything that you know, it's like, I want Hans Zimmer, I want Alan Silvestri, and I want Michael Giacchino. And if you can't get those 3, it's like, let me think for a second.
Where's my boy John Powell?
Oh,
sorry.
I'll give John Powell.
No, I'm sorry.
No, but there's obviously more than that, but you get my point.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. No, I know what you're saying.
Top tier, you know, to be honest, on who you would reach out for.
I just remember though, like, obviously Marvel scores are never like particularly great unless, you know, like there's some exceptions.
Doctor Strange score is good, to be honest. I actually like his main theme a lot.
Which one?
Doctor Strange.
Oh, no. I'm not actually talking about, well, I've ranted before about how I hate the No Way Home score, but I'm actually not talking about Giacchino here. Well, I am. Thor Love and Thunder has a lot of issues, but I remember I got so mad when they announced Michael Giacchino was going to do the score for it, because I was like, what the heck? You had Mark Mothersbaugh on Ragnarok, which, even if you don't think that score is great, it's obviously going to be better than Michael Giacchino giving you like another
they should have just kept Patrick Doyle for all of them. I mean, come on.
Well, yeah, sure. They should have I get Mothersbaugh for the third one because it's like going for that weird like 80s vibe. Even if pulls it off, that's up to you. We're not.
No, it's a different. He was going for an 80s synth. That's okay. It's a different. You need something different for your movie. You need something different. Yeah.
But if you're gonna go back for like the classical vibe for Love and Thunder, just call Patrick Doyle. Like, you know, like he did it. You sampled this track at the end of the last one.
I did Harry Potter, for God's sakes. He did a Harry Potter movie. I mean, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, but I agree. Giacchino's spread too thin these days. I think the only times I am really impressed by him nowadays is like the Pixar stuff. And I did like his Batman and Planet of the Apes scores, but that's...
I think he's always like... The thing is, it's less like there's always a good theme in there, but it's more about as a whole, right? As Lemon's earlier stuff, it's almost like every theme in the movie is a banger, versus like now he has one really good theme or 2 good themes in a movie and the rest feel like kind of filler.
Because he did the Lightyear score, which to me is... They had a good name theme, but I can't tell you anything else that was in that score. And the only reason I think that theme was really good is because it was like in an ad that they played in like the movie theater lobby, so I kept hearing it.
I gotta re-listen to it. I mean, I'm sure it's good. He also does the theme for
just
Space Mountain, by the way. Sorry, the Space Mountain in California is timed to Michael Giacchino custom music, and it's amazing. It's like his best.
Well, am I wrong that Ratatouille's score is mostly variations on the song, but it's sort of, the way I think of it is like that song arranged as the Incredibles score? I like the Ratatouille score, and I think it's much better than Cars, where you have this extremely jarring shift from, maybe it's not fair because it's like well-known country songs and then orchestral stuff, but surely we could compare that to like Finding Nemo, and Finding Nemo is like such a rich score. But I don't know. I mean, it's the score is kind of like the whole of Ratatouille, where if you take most of it, it's kind of like, oh, this is all right, and then it has one thing that is amazing about it that colors the rest of the film. And I like the Ratatouille score, but that would be my thing. Is like,
I'm curious, because I'm not really a guy.
Score.
I'm not really a guy who listens to scores like on their own, right? But I'm curious if what you're saying, 'cause, yeah, that's the only stuff that stands out. But I remember with Coco, right? When Coco came out, I was like, the songs in it are so good, but the score is it's a Giacchino score nowadays, whatever, like it's fine. And then there was a day I just sat down and actually listened to Store Coco, and I'm like, oh no, he's like doing a lot of like interesting themes here. Yeah. Just like obviously this movie is more paying attention to like the singing because it's a movie about singing and playing guitar. But it's like, no, there's a lot of cool, and I'm curious if like I sat down and listened to Ratatouille score, because my gut feeling is you're right, right? But like I've noticed that with his Pixar score, like with his good Pixar movie scores, because I do think Lightyear, I think Cars 2, like I don't think those really probably have hidden gems in there, but like maybe there's like some good stuff in here that you might not necessarily think, like maybe the music that plays when they're at the rat shop is really good, right? Like I don't know, or like you're saying I mentioned this briefly earlier when you talked about the abstract like food stuff, like the music that's playing during that is good. It's like a nice little like freeform jazz in the middle of it, and it's like but yes, obviously the main theme is really great. Right? Yeah. That's what we're talking about, really. We're saying.
I think sometimes when I watch, as someone who listens to scores a lot, it's like when you go to a concert, like you want to hear new stuff, and as much as even if a song's overplayed, there's an extra level of excitement when you know the song, right? There's a reason, like I used to DJ at the club actually, and there's a reason a lot of times I learned too, you don't want to DJ too fast through songs because the audience actually, like a movie sometimes, they want to hear it twice. If you play a song the audience doesn't know, like a dance song, and the drop comes the first time, it's like boom, 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 whatever it is, right? It drops, people go, oh, yay, and they dance. But if they enjoy it and they really like that, when you build it up longer the second time and they expect and know that's the sound they're going to hear, they actually go crazier when they know that sound. Yeah. So it's that same thing listening to a score where sometimes, and I find this a lot, where I feel like I have to listen to movie soundtracks separately. You hear the detail. And then once if I really do like it and watch the movie, then it sticks out. Because if not, the movie's it's being of service to the film. It's like servicing it. But when you know what the sound is, when you know what the cues are, and when you hear it, things become greater to you. Like, and not this is for everything, but like Rogue One, still not the greatest score, and we're being disappointed by it. But now having listened to it on its own multiple times through, I've enjoyed the music for what it is and heard the musicality in a way that I didn't expect because I was in my car listening to it. So now when I hear it in the movie, I like it more, which in return makes me like the scene more, which in return makes me like the movie more. So there's that extra like connection to it that I think when you listen to something separately, if it stands on its own, it then increases the movie and you can somehow see it. So you're right, though. I think sometimes you kind of only can hear the main theme unless you go listen to it more. And then once you notice all the stuff going on, because not everything's as explicit as John Williams. I mean, that's why John Williams is the best. I mean, every movie you see, it's like every character's got their own theme and it's memorable and you can hum it. I mean, I could sit here and we can hum 15 different Star Wars themes and it's, it is what it is.
I was just going to make this really quick comment where I think one thing, with soundtracks, because I remember I haven't rewatched Baby Driver since the first week it came out. I really should revisit it just as someone who is following Edgar Wright's career. Was very disappointed with Last Night in Soho, but whatever, we'll give him a mulligan. Because I was like, Baby Driver, I was like, it's okay, but one of my weird complaints of it is I felt like it used too many deep cuts to be fun. But now, since then, I've listened to those that soundtrack a lot. I'm curious if I ever revisit, I probably enjoy it way more. because now I know these songs. Because like the whole appeal of that movie is like we're editing these action sequences to these famous songs. And I was like, yeah, but like besides Tequila and I think it's Brighton Rock, like this movie really just uses deep cuts to me, and it's like that's not what I'm here for.
People react to that. Even Top Gun, the new Top Gun, then they were talking about that. It was only a month before they picked that. I'm not good with music, but the opening training montage, that famous rock song was like ding ding ding, right? Or how's it? Anyways. Basically, for the longest time, they had an unreleased Rolling Stones song, and it was good and it matched. But end of the day, they said that they basically came to the conclusion that there's extra energy when people like the song already. They're not like, oh, what song is this? Oh, and they're watching, they're trying to understand the song and understand the scene, and they're trying to think about, oh, I've never heard this song. Versus like, here's a song everyone, they hear it, they go, oh, that song, I like that song, and they watch the movie versus the opposite. So it's just an interesting little thing of our subconscious works.
Talking about scores is I just rewatched I rewatched the first two Creeds, but I'm only going to talk about the first one. But like that moment when the Rocky theme finally hits in the first Creed after it's held it back for the entire movie is just like, yeah, like there's no better way to do that. Like, you know, like giving you that finally. But
I watched that clip like 3 hours ago because I think we probably saw the same people online talking about it. It's kind of weird out of context of the whole film. Because they don't dwell on it, which surprised me. It's been a while since I've watched Creed altogether, but it's very clever.
Creed is so good. I love Creed. Creed is like one of those, like sometimes maybe I did give this movie 5 stars too quickly, and I didn't give Creed 5 stars on the first watch, but I'm like, no, like that's a movie I'm totally okay with defending from everyone who says that's too high for me. I like, that is a movie that I can watch and like get chills every single damn time I watch that movie and like cry when he goes like, I just want to prove I'm not a mistake. I'm just like, oh, it gets me every single time. Anyway, this isn't a Creed podcast. Anything else we want to talk about with Ratatouille?
We kind of did it, and then we got to the score, and then it was like, well, this is traditionally where the end of things are.
Sure.
Unless, you know, one of y'all does have something going on. But
we could just briefly talk about the vocal performance. We usually do talk about the vocal performance a bit. I think this is interesting because now Patton Oswalt is like such a... To me, like, he's like a comedian I actually kind of follow, but still, it's one of those things where, like, Toy Story, like, I'll never hear Tom Hanks, that's Woody, you know, and this, it's like, oh, no, that's Remy, you know, like, he's just using a speaking voice, but, yeah. I already mentioned that I really like Brad Garrett in this, but everyone else in this, I feel like, is like, yeah, they're good, you know, I don't know, it's definitely a movie where it's more like, I see the character more than I hear the voice.
Well, and this is interesting, too, because Linguini and the lawyer are both played by animators. And I think, you know, more people are played by animators. But
Emil is definitely, because Emil is Pete Sohn, who voiced also the cat in Lightyear, along with various other Pixar characters over the years. But yeah, sorry, go on.
I hate to compare it to Cars always, but that's just, in our lineup, that's what was on my mind, is Cars is so tied to those celebrities. I think it's another thing about Ratatouille, which is one of the things that makes it hard to market. But
yeah, Linguini sounds like someone. Like, it's the movie is playing. I'm like, is this a famous person? Who is this? I'm like, I know this voice, and I looked it up. Like, don't know who this is. But like the first 10 minutes, I was like, I know this guy, but I had no clue. But he has one of those voices that just sounds kind of, I guess.
I'm just checking very quick what Pixar roles he has. He is in Incredibles as the teacher who's like, coincidence? I think not. And then is he any other voice actor? No, it looks like it might just be that, actually. Other than Linguini, you know, like reprising Linguini for like rides places, you know? He's actually for Mark, he is in the Boys Night Out short the stripper short that we discussed one time on this podcast.
Yeah, and that's Teddy Newton. I didn't say his name. Teddy Newton is the lawyer. You can definitely hear it once you know that.
It's one of those things where he's always someone who Teddy Newton, I think his most iconic Pixar role, he's the phone in Toy Story 3, who's like, you're never getting out of here, kid. Yes. You know, like that guy. So, like, now you mentioned that. The thing is, to me, also with this movie, is John Ratzenberger, even he kind of disappears in his vote, because he's doing that French accent.
Yeah, you can tell it's him,
I guess that's him. Yeah, and he's also, I feel like it's the most modeled like him. Like, it's kind of ink suit actor in a way. I think one thing that's interesting about this cast to me that always sticks out to me now when I look at the Ratatouille cast is Will Arnett is in this. I feel like right before he became like the celebrity voice actor, and he like totally disappears in the role.
Who is he again?
And it's like, oh yeah, Will Arnett's in it. He's the chef who's
the
like,
thumb
I killed
guy. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Thumb. Yeah, but it's like he's got the accent going on. He's not really going full gravel, so it's like but it's like now he's like in every.
I mean, he also has 7
movie,
lines,
you know? Like,
so
well, he's got some funny ones.
But he
there,
never
you know?
speaks more than like a sentence at a time or two, so it's not too much to you to be like. It's not a monologue where you're like, oh, that's who it is.
But it's also like, I guess this was like a point in time, I guess probably after like Arrested Development ended and it didn't have like a cult following, because it's like, it's really weird to me that it is Will Arnett, but I guess he's just not like.
Well, this is before he did
anymore,
Blades of Glory, and before he was even in stuff like Let's Go to Prison and stuff like that. That may have been 2006, 7, or 8, but it was like just at the time.
These are Blades of Glory and Let's Go to Prison are right before this, but probably not when they're, you know, like cast, you know, but it's probably like the voice performance probably is way before then for this. But yeah,
there's something
he was on Danny Phantom. Oh my gosh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a working dude before you know him. There's one of my favorite things is I think Ian Holm is a standout, because I think other people are kind of playing versions of people that we're used to them seeing, at least. And then to have Ian Holm being Bilbo Baggins and then Skinner is very fun. He also has a moment of, you talked about the infinite editability of these movies. He has a line delivery where he says they're going to shut us down, and I don't think he delivers it as begging, but they animate it as begging. So that's something you commented earlier. That's something that set my brain off. Is I think Ian Holm knows that that's a stupid line to turn around and deliver to the rest of the chefs. I feel like there's something about his dialogue that says no, he's delivering that to Linguini, the new chef. It's just I have a lot of admiration for places he takes that character.
Yeah, we didn't talk about Skinner enough. I like, in general, he's great. He's so fun, and he's actually really funny. Like watching when he's so obsessed with them, and he's like, "The rat, I see it. It's there. It's not there." It's like it's pretty funny. It's a pretty great performance, and the animation's really good.
I also think like I was gonna say with the animation, I think his design is so like more cartoony than anything else in this, at least human wise, you know, and it works a lot. Like he and Anton Ego both kind of look like caricatures, and I think it really like adds a lot to both their personalities.
Yeah, if he was a regular sized guy,
and
I don't think it would be the same character at all. It so much helps.
Or
like so
he has such goofy ears, and it's just like, this is great. I love the design is so good on him. And I also wanted to, because we're talking about voice, I want to shout out, because I think he's also the only other celebrity voice actor we didn't mention, celebrity, non-known for voice acting role. I think Brian Dennehy does a lot with Django when Django is on screen. Like, he really sells those lines. And I think in a way, I think he's really the only character I can say. I think the voice does more for me than the animation, if that makes sense. I think he's the only character where it's like, it's really his performance that's coming through in that character. I think O'Toole too, but that's just because like Peter O'Toole's Peter O'Toole, right? Like, and of course, like Peter O'Toole, his big speech, we don't even see his character, right? So, but
well, he and Brian Dennehy kind of, you know, we talked about Kevin Spacey as Hopper, and I think they're kind of in that category of like, get the guy to play their like character type, and it'll work really well. I think that's where that comes from. In a good way. I'm kind of comparing them mentally to Skinner, which is a shift for me. But yeah, I think it's a credit to the people at Pixar.
Loved Hopper as a kid.
I don't know, when I think of Brian Dennehy, I just think of the joke from the South Park movie where they're singing about Brian Boitano, and he just walks in, he's like, "Hi, I'm Brian Dennehy," and they're like, what are you doing here? All right. So how would you say this contributes to our conception of the studio at Pixar? I think it shows like how crazy they're willing to go with their stories. Like the fact that this is a kids movie that is, I say kids movie, but, you know, like this would be viewed as a kids movie that's about the relationship of art and criticism, and like how hard it is to achieve and like succeed in places where you might not be wanted. Like this is like dealing with some really heady stuff, but it's still really funny. It's still like so creative. I think there's a reason this is like, I remember when they announced the WALL-E criterion, a lot of people were mad about it. I'm like, you know, no, I think Ratatouille should get one too. You know, like that was my whole, I think Ratatouille like completely belongs in that collection of like highbrow movies. It's like, I think this is one of Pixar's like, in a way, it's like I think WALL-E gets more discussion, but this is like one of their prime.
I would say this is almost more filmy than WALL-E. WALL-E in the beginning, but then WALL-E becomes almost more of a kids movie, I think, in the second half than this movie does, maybe. They're all kids movies. You know what I mean? I guess.
I think I didn't never say this because and it would come up down the road, but I think this is like a trilogy of sorts. This is the beginning of. I was going to bring that up too, actually. Yeah, because I think it also has to do with the fact that they got bought. Like these films, like we're saying, were in development before, and I think at first Disney knew that they had a new relationship to cater, and they couldn't step on their toes too much. I think that everyone was uninvolved. I think it took a little while, a couple movies for Disney to get their toes in. I think at first they made a movie without them, then one executive got into two, and then by the time the new decade came along, they were just another property Disney owned, and it was starting to become what it is now. Yeah.
Where
I think it says a lot then thinking about that going off going off of Ratatouille, WALL-E, and Up, that the next three are Toy Story 3, which is good, but it's a sequel, Cars 2, and then a princess movie, right? Like,
we need a Toy Story 3 because they're our biggest franchise. Cars is our biggest merchandise seller, and we need to sell. And we don't make enough movies for girls, so make a princess movie, right? Like that was like you could see those are three main motives that the studio would say first. But
I also think it's interesting the way you just said it is that like I do think they gradually get more and more like we have jokes in here for kids because obviously like WALL-E gets it. WALL-E I do think still is pretty like. Has its mind high, but it does have a lot of comic relief in that back half that I don't think I think the jokes in here are very, like, implemented in the story. Entirely, like, it's not like, oh, we cut to a meal for something funny. And then when Up comes along, even though Up is still, like, a very, like, good movie, it's like, oh, we have these talking dogs that are making jokes, and they're flying planes, and it's funny jokes with the dogs. And then it's like, and that's a big complaint, like, people who don't like Up talk about it, like, and I like
I
Up.
love Up, but my least favorite part is the ending.
So yeah, I would agree. I think these gradually become less because again, I said Ratatouille belongs in the Criterion Collection. I wouldn't say Up does.
No,
like personally, yeah, I wouldn't say Up does. But yeah, what would you guys have anything else to say about like how you think this would contribute to like Pixar's like legacy or you know?
Well, it's hard to look forward like you have because I'm kind of rewatching these a little more blind than you are. I think my perception now is, there's another support for Pixar as an auteur studio and that sort of thing. That's kind of my big takeaway from Ratatouille. I don't think that it's, I'm starting to get things like what you've been telling me about, everything Pixar is like a buddy comedy and that sort of thing. So patterns are emerging for me, but
this has such I never complained about it, but this has like one of the more like tropey second act break. You mentioned it, so that's why I didn't get into it. But this is like one of the things I immediately think of. They're like, oh, they break up at the end of the second act. I think definitely Ratatouille because it's just very like, oh, we're here. They're breaking up because we gotta have it to get us to like the third act. But because Linguini just kind of like Linguini like getting it to his head happens so quickly. It's like, all right, but it's fine. You know what? It's what you were saying also earlier. Like the seams are showing a little bit, and that's okay. But what I also actually wanted to push back on a bit, even though I know this is like us speaking to wrap up, is I have this thing where I say Pixar is one of the more auteur studios of any animation, at least in America. Because I think the Pete Docter movies feel very different from the Andrew Stanton movies, feel very different from the Brad Bird movies, feel very different from the John Lasseter movies to me. But in a way, when I'm watching this, I also do think it does feel like there was someone else's hand in this. Because I think you compare this to Incredibles and Iron Giant. I do think this feels very... I think it feels a lot gentler than either of them do, even though there's a lot of like, he's a jerk, but it's also like, it's much more like, it's willing to slow down and really relax. But I do think, the Brad Bird stuff does shine through too.
I do wonder how you guys rate this in your Pixar series, more or less, or like how high up do you put this on your, Pixar scale?
This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, even though we're about a third of the way through we're probably a sixth of the way through our journey. It's probably pretty high for me. We'll see if it's like top 5 or something like that. Because I think comparing the films to each other, it's actually a little lower than some other films. I feel like Finding Nemo is really going to be fighting for that top spot at the end of this project. But personally, Ratatouille is a film that I felt like watching this, I was like, I could watch this every day. It was incredible and terrifying.
What I will say right now, of what we've covered so far on my personal list, it looks like this comes in at... Because I'm removing Inside Out and Coco because I haven't rewatched them recently and like whatever. So to me, this only comes in behind Toy Story 2 so far of what we watched. I think this is really great.
Yeah.
Really phenomenal work. So up until this point, I would say, I guess this is the best Pixar original movie.
Yeah.
Because Toy Story 2 is the only one that's better than it.
Can I ask you, Jay, in the 5 films that you suggested when you wanted to come on here, how does this rank among those?
My Pixar-ness is kind of like, I have to rewatch them all again from the start, but in general, I'm a Toy Storyist. So I'm like, I think Toy Story 1 and 3 are the best movies by far. I think those are my 2 5-star Pixar movies. And then there's like a next tier, which is what I haven't decided. And that tier is pretty big. It's also but it's basically like Monsters, Inc., Incredibles, Ratatouille, Coco's the new one on that. And I don't know how I would rank those follow-ups. And Toy Story 2 is also there. So there's like basically the top 2. Which I have to rewatch the Toy Stories again, too. It's been a while, so I need to rewatch Toy Story 3. But
well, you got to get ready for 5.
Oh. So it's like there's kind of 5 spots fighting for the top 3, and they're tied. Like, they're all so close. Even like a hair under that, like I have Finding Nemo, like the smidges below those 5, and that's just because when I rewatch, I don't know, but I won't talk too specifically about that. But they're all so close. Like that's the thing. Like everything up until Toy Story 3, like honestly, so that's why it's hard for me to compare because I watched them all growing up and I liked them all, and as I got older, they've pretty much stayed the same quality in themselves that it's hard for me to pick what they are. But I have a feeling like maybe Coco is. I have to rewatch them all in order, but I've only seen Coco like twice, and I've seen these movies like 8,
Coco
9, 10,
like,
12 times, so it's hard.
Yeah, that's the thing with Coco. It's like to me, it's so obviously great, but it's also like I grew up with all these other ones, so it's so hard for me to be like, this is definitely better than everything I grew up with. But then it's also like, well, the things I grew up with I have nostalgia for, so the fact that this is competing with it is like must mean it's really good. Like,
Yeah.
All right, so Mark, you want to do our last thing we do before? Because we got to wrap it up.
Yes, really quick, we'll wrap it up. Jay, we like to do something here. A lot of film critics give films things like star reviews or things like that. We like to physically give the film something. It's maybe not a physical object. Maybe it's like an event, or you like to create some circumstance in your head, or maybe it's a performance. I don't know. Whatever you want to give the film. What did you give it? And we like to start like that because it's a little
get a vibe because it's kind of weird. Do you have something, Mark? Because
I mean, I could give this film a lot of things. I loved it. I'm gonna give it some crinkly bread.
You know, we never talked about that, but I think that is actually the longest impact this movie's had on me. Where whenever I go to like Panera, I will like crinkle the bread before I eat it. Like like hear that crunch, be like, it's fresh. But I'm gonna give it something a little stronger. No offense, Mark. I think that was a very good thing to give it.
I mean, here's my thing. I don't want to keep this too long. I want to give this because this film was so influential. I want to reward it with something that was like you said, this is part of our lives now, and movies are referencing Ratatouille and things like that. That's why I gave it to it.
Well, I'm going to give it, although I guess Ratatouille is like its legacy, but it will have more. I'm giving it the biggest legacy I can give it, okay? As time has gone on, print media has been dying out more and more. So I would like the final issue of USA Today, even though I guess it's a French critic, so this doesn't make much sense, but screw it, I'm going for it. The final print issue of USA Today, whenever that may happen, be it 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, in the culture section, we will print Anton Ego's review of Gusteau's. That is what I'm giving it, that prime spot in the final print issue of USA Today.
Well, that is a good gift. Yours was nice and dramatic.
I know. Well, I was going to say, that's why I say, mine is so big, and you're giving it bread, which I think is nice, too. It's just in a completely different direction.
Well, the gift I thought of, I feel like it's kind of a bad gift. I feel like it's a gift that might lead to our death. Like,
okay.
when aliens come and they ask for our culture, the gift I'm going to give them and this movie is the first thing that aliens should taste from our land is a nicely prepared dish of ratatouille.
Oh, no, that's nice. I like that.
And they can spit it out because disgusting vegetables, and then they'll blow us up. That's
Well, this was fantastic.
Yeah, this is a good one.
We're keeping you for a while, but Jay, do you want to plug yourself again before you leave?
Yes, first up, I'll say love to come back, love being on shows, love being on podcasts. If I didn't have prior plans, I would be down to talk for another 2 hours, so apologies, but I will literally come on anytime asked. But the final plug again, one last time for the 12, 13 listeners, don't know what you guys got, but I would just one of you, if you watch Northwood Pie, it would mean a lot. Tweet me, text me, let me know. If not, it's cool. But yeah, it just makes my day to know at least one person's watching it. That's really all I can say. For a movie this small, that I haven't made any money off of. Every time I see that someone's watching it, I go, wow, I guess it was worth it. And then I continue to make my top ramen or macaroni and cheese and live my broken hand, homeless life.
I watched it, and I hope that you get that Jeff Bezos penny.
Thank you. Well, then I have to say, if you wouldn't mind, please leave a review on Amazon. My last review was like a year and a half ago. The problem with these reviews is that you have to leave the reviews on the website. You can't leave it from your TV. So like people watch on their TV, and there's no way to leave a review. Oh yeah. So for the algorithm's sake, I have 62. If you give me my 63rd, then every movie with 62 is now below me. That's my ask.
I will not do that. I need no. I need 6 more people to watch and review Northwood Pie. I refuse not to leave the 69th review when we're so close.
Well, you can make some
other than that,
I'll do what you got to do.
I'll probably
review bomb Northwood
realistic
Pie.
Review bomb. We need 4 stars. A couple 4, 4.5. We've got to make it honest here.
Well, I'll probably review it tomorrow, so you all have that much time from when we recorded this. So
the listeners, this episode will come out after Marcus. Okay. Do you want to tell people where they can follow you on Twitter, Instagram, or you don't?
You can just find me at Jay Salahi, Jaysalahi, anywhere. The good thing about my name, or bad thing, is that if you Google me, it's me. Like it literally just says pictures of me. It's my Twitter. You can find Northwood Pie.
Someone.
So, yeah. Not a lot of famous Salahis.
Someone has been using...
Except for the people who crashed the wedding with Obama. That's always talks about.
Sorry, just very quickly, and then we will let you go. Someone's been using my VisionWorks account, apparently in Georgia, and I called them up about it, and I'm like, yo, I don't live in Georgia. I don't know why you're giving me updates on there. Because my credit card's not on there, so it's not like I'm being charged for these glasses, but I'm just like, you might want to, like, send these emails to whoever this is. And they're like, oh, don't worry, we'll fix it. And then I got like an email like earlier this morning saying, your orders. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever.
There's
like,
some Danny Vincent who keeps forgetting to pick up his glasses because of you.
Yeah, well, I called them and let them know. They didn't fix it. So
that's what it is.
Yeah, thank you again, Jay, for having you on. You're always a great guest. And I'm sure, even though I said, like, we're only going to have people on once at the beginning of this podcast, I'm sure I will get you back.
All you got to do is ask. That's all. I mean, I'm that close away. Just say when, and I'll be there.
Yeah, awesome. Cool.
All right, what are we doing next time?
Next time, we will be continuing with our Summer of 2007 series when we take a detour because David Silverman, I should have this open, always I never do, but David Silverman co-directed Toy Story 2 and went on to make his feature directing film on The Simpsons movie. So we will be doing an episode on The Simpsons movie, which is interesting because I've never seen it. I did not grow up with The Simpsons. So it's going to be a fun time at The Simpsons, but I'm like, I have no cultural memory of this thing other than it's the show that was on after Malcolm in the Middle that my mom did not let me watch. So, yeah. Jay, thanks again for coming on.
Of course. Simpsons movie is solid.
Yes.
It lives in my memory from seeing it 5 years ago.
The Simpsons movie is solid, everyone.
We'll
I haven't seen The Simpsons show, so maybe I'm completely just an ignorant man.
Wow.
So.
Oh! Looking for the Ocean is produced by Mark Young and Danny Vincent. Our original artwork was done by Sarah Knopf, and each episode is edited by me.
If you'd like to be notified about new episodes, you can find us on Facebook at Looking for the Ocean, a Pixar Journey, on Twitter at Pixar Journey, on Instagram at Looking for the Ocean Pod, and on our website, lookingfortheoceanpixar.podbean.com.
If you want to know what I'm up to, or find me on social media, you can head over to markyoungperformer.com.
And if you'd like to see all my takes on all the movies, you can find me on Letterboxd at Blankmans. If you'd like to hear me on another podcast, I also have The Snub Club, a podcast about film history. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.